Suddenly, the grass began losing its color. No, it wasn't at all withering. Quite the opposite, it was thriving, swaying as if some unseen gusts of wind were moving the blades, though no one around could feel them. It was simply losing its color. It grayed at an astonishing speed, to the point where it was hard to look at, an utterly uniform gray surface, devoid of shadows or reflections from the high sun. Anyone who glanced at the center of the phenomenon struggled to adjust their acuity of vision. "What is that?" asked an older, overweight man whose baggy shorts barely clung to his enormous belly. "Can you see it as well?" "Oh my God!" A young woman in a vintage swimsuit, typical of the 70s, consisting of huge bottoms that covered as much as they could, paired with an equally large top, rose from a blanket spread near the guest house porch. "What is that?" The large gray area expanded slowly, slower and slower, forming a somewhat irregular, jagged circle. Due to the eye adjustment issue, it was not so easy to estimate its diameter at a glance, perhaps around 30 meters. Moments later, the graying affected the trees as well. As if something was pulling away the green and brown, leaving only gray. A dozen or so vacationers staying at the Peruda guest house couldn't take their eyes off the grayness zone. There was something unsettling about it, though no one felt scared, yet. The phenomenon was too strange, too extraordinary to provoke immediate fear. Two girls, students perhaps, wearing some atrocious linen swimsuits decorated in flowers, barely raised their heads from the pillows of their wooden sunbeds, shielding their eyes from the sun with their hands. "Is it spreading?" asked an older man with a professorial demeanor, adjusting his glasses. "I don't know," replied the loose shorts man. "Probably not anymore." "We should call the militia," declared a woman preparing sandwiches on the veranda. "What for?" Well, one should call the militia." "And what will we say? That the grass is gray?" "Well, maybe it's, some kind of contamination. Or something." "Environmental contamination is what the West has," the professor said, showing off his wisdom. "Here, under socialism, it's clean. Unfortunately," added the freelancer, or perhaps even a twig seller, judging by the Ford Taunus he had flaunted mercilessly, parking it right by the guest house entrance to make sure everyone noticed. "Unfortunately what?" "Unfortunately, under socialism it's clean. Nothing ever happens here." "You'd prefer polluted beaches, like in Italy?" Some woman, holding the hand of a child dressed in clumsily homemade clothes intended to resemble a sailor's uniform, stood in the guest house doorway. "And stop rubbing your eyes already," she yelled at the boy. "Want to go blind? Do you want to gouge out your eye? Didn't you hear what the doctor said? You've got to control yourself." The boy had bad luck. The turn of 60s and 70s was a time when virtually no treatments for allergies existed in socialist Poland. The condition was also rarely diagnosed. Children allergic to pollen were often sent to the countryside during the summer to get some fresh air, right into the densest concentrations of allergens. Already miserable kids, ostracized by their peers and even their own families due to constant tearing, coughing, sneezing, and runny noses, were en masse transformed into the disabled, letting their ailment deteriorate into bronchial asthma. "And what do you think you are doing?" the woman screamed. "I said, stop rubbing your eyes." She suddenly stopped and looked at the patch of perfect grayness just a few steps away. "Oh. What is that strange spot?" "It's not there," sneered the freelancer. "Environmental contamination only happens in the West. And you're the one to judge, right?" The professor grabbed a long stick that someone had used yesterday to roast sausages over the campfire. With a determined stride, he approached the edge of the gray zone. He stared at it intently for a moment, then poked the grass with the stick. "It's not burned." "This isn't ash." "Then why can't we focus our gaze on it?" one of the students asked. "I don't know. It's like there's no shadow." The professor pulled a handkerchief from the waistband of his swim trunks, folded it, pressed it to his mouth, and crouched down, continuing to prod with the stick. "But even a single blade of grass would cast a shadow," said one of the students. "Well, I don't know," came his muffled response from behind the handkerchief. "If something is perfectly gray. But this happened so suddenly." The undiagnosed allergy boy, freed for a moment from his overbearing mother's watchful eye, darted forward. He ran up to the professor and yanked a handful of grey grass. "Leave it! Step back, brat! Don't touch that!" The boy lifted his prize to his eyes. The professor tried to knock it out of his hand with the stick, but after a brief scuffle, he gave up. Instead, he leaned over the boy's small hand and, after a moment of hesitation, took a small grey twig from him. "It does cast a shadow on my hand." Both students and the freelancer approached cautiously. As if fearing it might burn them, they each plucked a few handfuls of the grey grass. "You need to rinse them with water," the boy's mother fretted as he started rubbing his eyes again. Thanks to being sent to the countryside for the fresh air, his condition had worsened. In the city, in the enclosed rooms he'd always begged his parents for, he would have been much better off. But in the 70s, who listened to kids? Everyone knew children had to spend the summer in the fresh air. And that very fresh air was slowly killing him. "We need to see a doctor. We need to call the militia," repeated the woman in the oversized swimsuit. A few more people approached the jagged grey circle. Someone touched it with their shoe, while another hesitantly stepped onto the grey grass, trying to crush it underfoot. It still seemed burnt. But it wasn't. "Is there a phone here?" The professor dared to approach the grey tree and broke off a small twig. He gave up on holding the handkerchief to his mouth. No smell, no burning, no fumes. "There should be one in the guest house." "There is," confirmed one of the students. "But it's hard to hear anything on it." "Actually, you can't hear anything," added the other, "and the landlady charges a fortune. She won't take any money if we're calling the militia." "Who knows with her," muttered the freelancer, tearing off a few grey leaves. "They cast shadows." He held one over his hand. "But it's hard to look. I can't focus my eyes. Perfect grayness." "Or something," the professor added. "It causes accommodation problems." He hesitated briefly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm calling the militia." Finally someone does. An overweight woman, obese in a typical Polish fashion, adjusted her enormous bra. The entire scene had yet another witness. A little boy, almost 5 years old, was lying hidden in the bushes about 30 paces away. His friends had covered him with moss, turf, and small branches. He was well concealed indeed, no one even suspected he was there. The boy was in a tough spot. Those cursed almost 5 years. His 3 friends, with whom he had come on vacation, were much older. Because of this, he always lost out. When playing for tankmen, he had to be Grigorij, relegated to driving a makeshift vehicle made of branches. When forming a scout patrol, he was placed on watch duty. His friends clearly wanted to get rid of him. He was simply too young for them. Every moment, they came up with some task for the little one, just to get him out of the way so he wouldn't interfere with flirting with girls or smoking cigarettes in secret. In the group, he was a nobody. And now, once again, they had assigned him just a task to free themselves of the almost 5-year-old. The friends had hidden him carefully near a rival guest house. Fresh from watching a movie based on Broszkiewicz's novel Great, Greater, and Greatest, they convinced him that visitors from another planet would definitely appear there today. His job was to observe everything and report back. Despite his almost 5 years, he didn't really believe in aliens. But now, the little boy watched with his mouth open as the strange grey blot formed. He witnessed the shock among the vacationers, their clumsy attempts to figure out what it was. He saw the arrival of a policeman summoned by phone. The officer wasn't quite sure what was going on either. He parked his motorcycle against the side of the building and then, to be thorough, checked the IDs of those standing closest, recording all the details in his notebook. It was clear he had no idea what to do. The police radio on his motorcycle wasn't working properly, so he used the landline to report the strange grey blot to his superiors. Matisik floored the gas pedal of the brand-new Soviet GAZ damn car. The ride was so bumpy that Temeki had trouble getting his egg sandwich, prepared by his wife, into his mouth. The eggs, wedged between 2 slices of bread, had been enhanced not just with horseradish paste, but, unfortunately, with garlic as well, causing Temeki to exude a scent so overwhelming that it could rival mustard gas. "So," he asked, spilling breadcrumbs all over his lap. "I'll try driving up that hill," Matisik said, pointing to a small rise. "Maybe the radio will finally work up there." Luckily, the area surrounding Bydgoszcz is full of hills and valleys, quite unlike Wrocław, that infernal flatland where no radio ever worked properly. Matisik hit the gas again, turned off the uneven asphalt, and stopped among the pines on a patch of sand. He picked up the microphone. "Patrol 7 to Chatterbox. Do you read me?" Loud and clear came the distorted voice of a young woman, crackling through the high-frequency equipment. Of course, Chatterbox had a different official code name, Whistler 3, but everyone who'd experienced the stream of chatter pouring from its speaker never used the formal designation. Even Mrs. Beta herself quickly got used to the nickname. "Chatterbox to Patrol 7. Why aren't you responding?" "Over. Point all complaints at the manufacturer of these damned radios." "Over. Chatterbox to 7. I'm losing you. Why are you disappearing?" "Over. The signal was bad. Only now I found some hill to reconnect." "Over. Chatterbox to 7, repeating the message. We have the effect in your area. Confirm receipt." "Over." Temeki swore so foully that Matisik couldn't help but be glad the radio's broadcasting switch was off. He watched his colleague toss his half-eaten egg sandwich out the window and wipe his mouth. "Fucking asshole fucked son of a bitch." Temeki muttered more normally now, exhaling garlic fumes. "Patrol 7. Confirming receipt about the effect," Matisik said. "Over. Chatterbox to 7. Pichiska. Repeating, Pichiska. It's in your vicinity, gentlemen." "Over. But there's only 2 of us," Matisik snapped, losing his composure before switching to at least a semblance of proper protocol. 7 to Chatterbox. There's only 2 of us. Jesus Christ. Over. Chatterbox dropped, sticking to the procedure. "Mr. Felek. I'll try to send you something from Bydgoszcz, but that'll take about 2 hours. The team from Warsaw might get there by the evening. I've got nothing." "Nothing, Mr. Felek." Over. "Mrs. Beta, there's only 2 of us." Over. Temeki pulled a map from the glove box, swearing their ears off. "Mr. Felek, there are a dozen or so people affected. The guest house is isolated. Some policeman called. Maximum effect. Do something. Please, Mr. Felek." Over. Chatterbox. "There's only 2 of us. Don't you get it? Just 2. Jesus. God, God, God." Over. "Mr. Felek, I know. Jesus, I can't come up with anything. Christ. I'll send you Bydgoszcz in about 2 hours, maybe. If everything goes well. I'm sorry." Over. "Damn you, old bitch," Temeki muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Thankfully, the broadcast switch was off again. His finger traced the map and landed on the right spot. "But we can't do it like that." Over. "Goddamn it. What do you want me to do, Mr. Felek?" "Jesus, I can't do anything." Over. "Mrs. Beta, the effect, and at least a dozen people, and there's just the 2 of us. And what about securing the area? What about isolation, guards? What can we do?" Over. He must have pissed her off. A long silence followed, broken only by static crackling over the speaker. "Chatterbox to 7. Please confirm the effect and follow protocol." Over, she said formally. "I confirm the effect. I'm not taking responsibility. Please record that there's only 2 of us." Over. Chatterbox to 7. "I confirm the patrol count is noted. I confirm the order to apply special procedure. I confirm." She hesitated. "Mr. Felek," her tone softened suddenly, "I'm really sorry. I'll make sure support is there in 2 hours. I'll go out of my way to make it happen." Warsaw might get there by the evening, maybe. Over and out. Out, Matisik confirmed. Fucking asshole fucked son of a bitch. Temeki quoted himself, jabbing a point on the map with his finger. The almost 5-year-old boy hidden in the bushes saw everything. First, a Soviet GAZ jeep arrived. It circled the Peruda guest house twice, carefully avoiding the grey blot, as if the passengers of the off-road vehicle wanted to assess the situation without risking contact with anyone. Then, spraying sand from under its wheels, the jeep came to a stop, blocking the only road leading to the highway toward Bydgoszcz. 2 broadly smiling men stepped out. Without hesitation, they unrolled a piece of string and drove 2 stakes into the ground. "Good day, citizens," one of them said. "Good day, citizens," Matisik said as he tied the string around the stake. The most important thing was to create a barrier. The string was the only effective method. Otherwise, people would get closer, and then... "We're from the leak containment unit," he added, pointing to the signs attached to the sides of the vehicle. "I'd like everyone to gather in the guest house lobby." "And what for?" the professor asked. "God help us. The Polish people. If these were Germans, Brits, Americans, or Russians, everything would go smoothly. But here, someone always had to ask, and what for? Here, someone always ignored procedures, asked questions, scattered in all directions, no discipline at all. That was just the Polish way. There never was, and never would be, any authority they respected, no rules they couldn't break. Managing a group of vacationers with just 2 people was nothing short of a miracle. In America, 1 officer would probably suffice. There, people cooperated with the authorities. Not here. Never. No matter the reason. Everyone always believed they knew better than any authority figure. Thankfully, after numerous past blunders, the procedure had been refined fairly well. Learning from past mistakes. A goddamn expensive education. Ladies and gentlemen. Matisik's smile grew even wider. An underground pipeline has burst. Please don't approach our vehicle. It's carrying very dangerous chemicals from Belchito, he recited from the operating instructions. The vehicle is contaminated. We've just come straight from an operation at the mine. No one thought about the distance between Pichiska and Belchito. Belchito was a key word, a purely psychological trick. Everyone knew that name. But, of course, the behavior of Poles, as always, remained highly unpredictable. A pipeline? Here, one of the students asked. I study hydraulic engineering. What idiot would plan a pipeline under a lake? She pointed to the shimmering blue surface visible through the pines. I have no idea what kind of idiocy is ordered by the top, Matisik replied without missing a beat. Of course, everyone believed in the centrally ordered idiocy. I have my map, I know what happened. What happened? The professor echoed. The pipeline burst, sir. Everyone needs to gather in the guest house lobby. But why? The hardest moment. Fucking difficult. How does one convince Poles to gather in one place instead of wandering off? Fortunately, the specialists who wrote the procedure gave it their all. I need to take everyone's details from their ID cards. That's the basis for compensation payouts. Absolutely everyone must be accounted for. Compensation? What for? No one in Poland would believe in compensation being willingly offered for anything. While the promise of money was enticing, no one was that naive, but the procedure experts were truly the best of the best. Ladies and gentlemen, normally no one gets reimbursed for a ruined vacation, but we've received extraordinary credits from the ministry. If we don't spend them by the end of the year, we won't get new ones next year. That's why we're paying out compensation wherever we can. We have to spend this money. Otherwise, no funding next year. They believed it. A few people even started moving toward the guest house, which was practically a miracle. The rest remained standing, watching the 2 newcomers. The policeman debated a serious matter in his mind. Should he check their IDs or not? Another damn hard moment ahead. Both Matisik and Temeki walked over to the trunk and pulled out 2 large bags. The procedure experts were, indeed, brilliant. Both men started complaining loudly. What kind of idiotic regulations are these? What moron came up with this? God, having to wear OP-1 suits just to inspect an oil stain. We're going to boil alive in this heat. The professor, however, was skeptical. Why do you need chemical protection suits? He asked. Well, you see, Matisik struggled with the cumbersome rubber suit. If we don't wear them, we'll lose our bonuses. That's the rule. All it takes is for someone here to report to our company, and it's over for us. We'll be ruined because some idiot wrote up our regulations. Everyone understood that as well. But no one's going to report. Sure. Matisik finished suiting up, tying all the straps. Though it seemed miraculous, no one, seeing the 2 men dressed in full chemical protection suits, panicked or even showed any unease. This was all thanks to them strictly following the procedure. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But how am I supposed to support my wife and kids without my bonus? But is there any danger for us? One of the students asked. Yes, from the Martian invasion, Temeki muttered. Oh, but there is. Matisik added. I can give you our regulations to read. 300 pages in fine print. You'll go grey before you finish it. Both men donned gas masks and tied the rubber hoods over them. They effectively lost the ability to communicate with the group. Their muffled voices inside the masks were so garbled that they could have been singing the national anthem and the listeners would hear it as reciting of Sir Thaddeus' invocation. Another tough moment. Now, they had to act damn fast. The almost 5-year-old boy, hidden in the bushes nearby, saw everything as if laid out before him. One of the men went to the back of the GAZ Jeep and pulled out a Kalashnikov rifle. Hidden from view, he began attaching a huge suppressor to the barrel. The other man opened the vehicle's side compartment and retrieved a submachine gun. The boy didn't know it was a PM-63, widely known as RAK. Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare your IDs. We'll begin taking down your details shortly. Temeki stepped out from behind the Jeep, holding the suppressed Kalashnikov behind his back. Ladies and gentlemen, I repeat, please prepare your IDs. We'll begin the process shortly. 2 people had their IDs on them. Matisik reloaded the PM-63, and Temeki also cocked the Kalashnikov's bolt. A child pulled a few coins from his pocket. Mom, can I run to the village for ice cream? Go. I have to stay here because they're taking down details for the compensation. Jesus, how difficult is it to aim with the gas mask on? Those 2 cursed, small, round lenses. How were you supposed to align the sights? But Temeki was a sharpshooting master. With the Kalashnikov weighed down by the suppressor, he shot the brat dead with a single bullet. The vacationers stood frozen, too shocked to react. Temeki shot the boy's mother before she could scream, and Matisik took out the policeman before he could even reach for his holster. Careful not to squeeze the trigger too hard and accidentally switch to automatic fire, Matisik adjusted his grip under the barrel. Take aim. Nothing in a rush. Temeki shot the professor and the woman in the enormous swimsuit, while Matisik took down both students. But aiming in this fucking mask, so damn annoying. One cannot really align the sights. The almost 5-year-old boy lying in the bushes nearby watched with his mouth wide open. 2 men in what looked like space suits, with strange pipes sticking out of their mouths, were killing the vacationers. Swiftly. Efficiently. Without hesitation. Then, the 2 ran into the guest house. One tripped, and they collided at the doorway. From the inside, the boy heard the smooth pew-pew-pew of the silenced Kalashnikov and the loud boom-boom-boom of the RAK. Moments later, they ran back out. One jumped into the car and began setting up some strange contraption on the side of the vehicle. It looked like a shower. The other circled the area, searching the surrounding bushes. The boy closed his mouth. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His limited understanding, so small compared to an adult's experiences, offered no answers. Was he dreaming? Was this just a nightmare? Some kind of play? What is this? What is this? What is this? The little boy squeezed his eyes shut at the exact moment the tall man in the OP-1 chemical suit parted the bushes straight above and aimed the RAK submachine gun at him. Hofman woke with a loud sigh to the sound of the phone ringing. Had he fallen asleep at his desk? Damn it! Apparently, yes. Last night had been rough, a fight with his wife, not so effective sleeping pills, followed by nightmares. He felt completely wrung out. Worse, he had a cold. Theoretically, catching a cold in July was an achievement, but Hofman managed even that. He wiped his nose with a disposable tissue, then picked up his phone and answered the call. Yes? His voice was shaky, barely audible. Yes, I'm listening, he repeated, louder this time. Mr. Marek, came the voice of a young woman. A swamp. Oh Christ, not today. Please? Got a report over the radio. At least she spared him the snide remarks about a presumed hangover and went straight into business mode. There was a shootout. A guy took down 3 men with AKs using just a TT. Alcaprim. Alcaprim had to be in the desk somewhere. But where? Hofman rummaged through the drawers. Mr. Marek? Are you there? I'm here, I'm here. No Alcaprim. Instead, he found an old pack of disposable tissues. He eagerly unfolded one. Strange case. It begun as usual, you know the drill. When we got the radio call, the CSS operator sent the criminal division team to the scene, notified the investigative section duty officer, and brought in the forensic technician. She could have spared him the lecture. Hofman knew exactly what happened next. The investigative team arrived at the scene. Someone notified the provincial command duty officer as well as the commander himself. There was likely already a local precinct team at the scene, since the shooting occurred in their jurisdiction. The CSS, or Command Support System, essentially the folks answering the 997 and 112 emergency numbers along with the municipal command duty officer, was on standby, ready to provide support at a moment's notice. The CSS oversaw all precinct duty officers as well as patrol and traffic vehicles equipped with computer terminals. So we notified the prosecutor, she continued, but something strange happened. What happened? Nothing at first. The guys apprehended the suspect, conducted the site inspection. Armed robbery, apparently, though we're not sure what the goal was. And then, things got tricky. What do you mean? Well, I don't know exactly. But the investigating officer committed suicide. Jesus Christ. Truly bad luck. Then 2 sergeants died in a car accident. And Jagielski had a heart attack and died, and... What? Is this a mafia's doing? He desperately needed 2 Alcaprim pills, that was his one and only point of focus at the time. No. All natural causes. But anyway, you're taking over the case. Jesus. Where the hell were those goddamn pills? He distinctly remembered having them. After hearing where the case files and all the paperwork were located, and learning that the suspect was still in the clink, but that the prosecutor was about to release him because he was an officer in the Polish army, Hofman pressed the button to end the call. He walked over to the window, opened it, and stared for a long moment at the imposing Nazi-erected buildings on Lakowa Street, which now housed the Wrocław police headquarters. Over 30 years earlier, the almost 5-year-old boy was running through the forest, bleeding profusely. He was bawling at the top of his lungs, tears blurring his vision to the point where he could barely see anything. What was that? What was that? What was that? He burst onto a small clearing, wobbling on his feet, and turned onto a narrow, sandy path winding through the pines. Moments later, he reached the villa where his parents had rented a room. He was noticed immediately, his loud crying gave him away. First, by his 3 friends, who took the roles of Janek, Gustlik, and Tomek from the crew of the tank Rudy's 102, and then by his mother and the other vacationers. Oh my God, his mother screamed. You're covered in blood. Mommy. Mommy. Jesus Christ. Help. My son. A few vacationers rushed to pick the boy up. Someone ran for a first aid kit, another, more practical one, shouted that they'd head to a house with a telephone to call an ambulance. They knew exactly where, just 2 kilometers away. What happened? His mother kept repeating, unknowingly echoing her son's question. What happened? I hit a tree. While I was running. What happened? The vacationers tried to remove the blood-soaked shirt from the boy. Someone took iodine, gentian violet, and bandages out of the first aid kit. Aliens came, the boy shouted. Aliens from space. He probably hit a knot or a broken branch, interjected the man who was the best badminton player. But that wound. Looks like a gunshot. Oh my God. Oh my God, his mother wailed. Aliens came. First, everything went grey. A ball of grey. Or something. Then they got out of their vehicle. It had a shower on its side, and they were dressed as people. But then they put on their space suits. Oh God. Oh Jesus. God, God, God. My son. It's a shock. We need to get him to the hospital. Holy Mother, the boy's going to bleed out. Do something. And they had these pipes coming out of their mouths. And they were breathing so loudly. And they killed everyone. They killed them. No point waiting for the ambulance, yelled the man who was best at badminton. Wrap him in something and put him in my car. We're going to buy gasks. They killed everyone. They had pipes coming out of their mouths. They had pipes. God. Somebody do something. Wrap the boy in bandages and into the car. Mom's coming with us. And someone else, just in case. I'll go, offered a man with the look of a lawyer. It's a good idea. In half an hour, we'll be in Bydgasks. At a proper hospital. They had pipes. They had pipes coming out of their mouths. 3 older boys quietly moved away from the commotion, exchanging nervous glances and growing increasingly frightened. Well, I think we overdid it with the alien stories, muttered the one acting as Gustlick, tucking his well-worn copy of Great, Greater and Greatest back into his waistband. Damn, whispered Janek. Will they find out? Tomek checked to make sure the pack of sport cigarettes was still well hidden in his pocket. We'll get a parental interrogation for sure. No doubt. Let's ditch all the smokes. What if they take us to the militia? Don't even say that. Hofman sifted mindlessly through the paperwork. The situation seemed straightforward enough. A certain Felikjan Matisik, age 72, a retired officer of the Polish army, took a legally owned TT pistol from his home and went with his family to a barbecue in the forest. Wife, elderly, to put it mildly, daughter, son-in-law, grandkids. Just a casual outing. After all, everyone takes a gun to a family barbecue party. Totally normal, isn't it? While the animal tissues were being roasted, 4 men approached. 3 were armed with Kalashnikovs, and the 4th was unarmed. The unarmed one simply asked if Matisik was Matisik. Next, events escalated quickly. The unarmed man apologized for the presence of Matisik's family, but implied that Matisik surely knew why they were there. At which point, the retired officer of the Polish army drew his TT and shot the 3 men with the Kalashnikovs. Well, what was there to even investigate? Hofman's brain, fogged by a hangover and a sleepless night, wasn't working well that day. What was there to investigate? Just your everyday Polish forest barbecue. One of the officer's grandchildren grabbed a Kalashnikov from one of the dead attackers and started firing at the fleeing man, the only one of the attackers that survived the shooting. He emptied a 30-round magazine but only managed to hit the ankle of a man changing a tire on his Daewoo Matais 50 meters away. The man that ran away was not found, the victims had no ID cards, and their fingerprints didn't match anything in the database. Sunday morning like any other. 3 corpses, 1 injured, pensioners and children shooting at anything that moves. Absolutely normal. Hofman took a sip of mineral water. Jesus, he said out loud. Who wrote this crap? What kind of nonsense is this, for God's sake? What is this? Victims, 3+1. A member of the police team hanged himself, 2 died in a car accident, a 4th had a heart attack. What is this? What is this? He bit his lip, trying to steady his suddenly trembling hands. The childhood nightmare came flooding back. He forced himself to calm down and looked at the files again. Are you Fabryka Słów? The unarmed attacker had asked. Yes, came the reply. He wasn't particularly enjoying the barbecue. The forest surrounding Rocklaw, often patrolled by inspectors in their official little fireouts, were on their own sufficiently discouraging this form of Sunday leisure. And these clouds, threatening with an unexpected shower. Matisik checked his weapon again. He was never wrong. He was standing under a tree now, a hazy figure, invisible to anyone else, laughing incessantly. The 72-year-old retired officer, however, knew better. He rose heavily, ignoring his grandchildren's questions about whether he was going to pee and his daughter's offer to help him. Now. It was going to happen now. For men emerged from behind the trees. 3 of them held Kalashnikovs, held ready to be used at once. Morons. Special Forces commandos. The kind of overtrained men you'd often see on TV, walking single file with a hand on the shoulder of the guy in front, weapons at the ready. They looked incredibly intimidating on television. Their only problem was that none of them had ever killed anyone in their lives. Just drills. 0 corpses. Mr. Fabryka Słów, the 4th man, the one unarmed, asked. Yes. I'm sorry to do this in front of your family, but... You know. I know. Matisik drew the TT he had preloaded in advance and shot one of the commandos in the head. Almost point blank. As he aimed at the second, he had to align the sights. He didn't flinch at the blood that splattered onto his face. Shot. He shifted his aim to the third. Breath. Shot. The 7.62 Tokarev round passed cleanly through the skull. None of the victims managed to react. They were well trained, but no one had ever taught them how to kill. They lacked this practical experience. Matisik lowered the weapon. He approached the 4th man. Well? I'm listening. Arg, the civilian said, loud and clear. Not sure if I understand. Arg, the man repeated, swallowing hard. Well, now I get it, Matisik mocked. I can't shoot you, bastard, because a court case over using excessive force in self-defense would drag on for 3 years. The civilian didn't seem to believe him. He turned and began to run. And that's when something unplanned happened. Matisik's grandson, an 11-year-old boy, grabbed one of the Kalashnikovs from the fallen commandos and fired an entire burst. 30 rounds. Not a single one hit the fleeing man. As the recoil jerked the gun around, he sprayed bullets everywhere, mostly punching holes in the clouds, apparently effectively, because rain began to fall almost the very moment. There was, however, one more tangible result. A man fixing his car 50 meters away suddenly started screaming and hobbling. Blood was pouring from his right ankle. Matisik glanced at the hazy figure laughing under the tree. He was always right. Fabryka had learned to appreciate that. "30 years earlier, an investigative team made up of vacationers and 3 nosy boys set out to uncover what really happened at the Peruda guest house in Pichiska. What had caused the almost 5-year-old boy to end up in a Bydgoszcz hospital in total shock, with a horrific wound on his shoulder. Unfortunately, about 300 meters from the villa where they were staying, their path was blocked by an old, battered Nissan van parked sideways across the sandy road. 2 men and a woman greeted them with smiles. "Good day," said the woman. "We're from the Bydgoszcz gas emergency. You can't go any further." "Why not?" "Gas leak. Or rather, an explosion." The young woman gestured toward a plume of smoke rising above the treetops. Well, that's what happens when people can't handle gas cylinders properly. Were there any casualties? I wouldn't know, sir. We were just told to guard the road. But what exactly happened? No idea, she yawned. Something went boom and set part of the forest on fire. I'm just here to make sure no one else gets hurt. The fire brigade is putting it out over there. You see, we've been terribly worried, the vacationer with the lawyerly appearance insisted. A little boy came running from there, babbling, ha, ha, about aliens in spacesuits, and... What's the boy's name? The young woman flicked away her barely lit cigarette and pulled a notebook from her pocket. Marek Hofman. She wrote it down. You see, I need to know because we'll be paying out compensation. Normally, this isn't done, but we've received massive funding from the ministry, and, you know, if we don't spend the money by the end of the year, we'll lose it and won't get new funding next year. You understand, of course. Shut up, chatterbox, growled one of the previously silent men, dressed in overalls with the logo of Bydgoszcz's Gas Emergency Service on the back. Who listens to a 5-year-old kid anyway? The lawyer vacationer waved his hand dismissively. So, you said Hofman? Marek Hofman? With 2 then S and 2 Fs? Chatterbox, shut your trap. The vacationers were a bit put off by the man's rude tone toward the woman. But, well, all workers. Someone with only primary school education can't possibly know about things like courtesy and respect for women. Meanwhile, at a Bydgoszcz's hospital, doctors were saving the life of almost 5-year-old Marek Hofman with 1 N and 1 Ref. The boy had no idea that after the vacationers retreated from their failed investigation, a chilling message crackled through the decrepit Nysa van's radio, it's spreading. Everyone report! Little Hofman couldn't possibly know that he owed his life to the terrible luck of Chatterbox, and to the fact that her body was burned, along with her accidentally torn OP's 1 suit and the notebook in her pocket. Every good cop has their unofficial sources of information, but this one was truly exceptional. Hofman used to call it Springlet. Springlet's real name was Anne, a woman of 27. Once, they had been madly in love, but over time, things fizzled, or perhaps even burned, out. Yet, what after all rarely happens in such cases, they remained close friends. They helped each other, supported one another, and did small favors. 2 friends. Close, genuine. They could have rekindled their love at any moment, but they had grown used to this arrangement. They understood each other and weren't jealous over trivial things. The current setup suited them both. She provided him with all the information he needed. He, in turn, could arrange her anything she needed, something a good police officer was fully capable of. Springlet was thoroughly concealed. No one, apart from Hofman, even knew her real name, though many people saw her every day at the headquarters. Not even his most recent lover, whom he'd even call the woman of his life, with whom he had serious plans, knew who Springlet was. It was a secret he guarded more fiercely than anything else in the world. Springlet was the interagency coordination assistant to the big boss himself, and, therefore, had top-level access to every database, archive, and file, not just in the police force, but also in intelligence, counterintelligence, civilian and military agencies, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the Internal Security Agency, the Border Guard, the Army, the Special Services Section, the Government Protection Bureau, Customs agents, the Fire Brigade, also the volunteer units, Emergency Medical Services, the Institute of National Remembrance, and every other agencies involved in information archiving. She was invaluable. She was brilliant. She was also an excellent IT specialist. According to her, she left no traces of her activity in any database or archive. Hofman believed her without question. And so, no one ever found out who the mysterious Springlet really was. No one. Ever. Yet, now, even Anne had failed. Probably for the first time since they'd met. I've got nothing. Felikjan Matisik, age 72. Exemplary military service, retired at the rank of captain. Legally owned several firearms. No accidents, no official records. He's like some kind of strange ideal. I checked everything in the Silesian military district and in Warsaw. Honestly, I can't believe my eyes, but there's literally nothing. Nothing. It's like the guy doesn't exist. Like he was never on this earth. There's got to be something. There's nothing. Christ! There has to be something. At least get me his photo. That was no big deal for her. The face of a 70-year-old man filled the screen. Damn! I feel like I've seen him before. Want an earlier photo? If you can. The sound of rapid typing. After a short moment, a photo of a 40-year-old man in uniform appeared on the screen. There you go, master. And smiled and rubbed her hands together. Will do? The almost 5-year-old boy lying in the bushes nearby watched with his mouth wide open. Two men in what looked like space suits, with strange pipes sticking out of their mouths, were killing the vacationers. Swiftly. Efficiently. Without hesitation. Then, the two ran into the guest house. One tripped, and they collided at the doorway. From the inside, the boy heard the smooth pew-pew-pew of the silenced Kalashnikov and the loud boom-boom-boom of the RAK. Moments later, they ran back out. One jumped into the car and began setting up some strange contraption on the side of the vehicle. It looked like a shower. The other circled the area, searching the surrounding bushes. The boy closed his mouth. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His limited understanding, so small compared to an adult's experiences, offered no answers. Was he dreaming? Was this just a nightmare? Some kind of play? What is this? What is this? What is this? The little boy squeezed his eyes shut at the exact moment the tall man in the OP-1 chemical suit parted the bushes straight above and aimed the RAK submachine gun at him. It was not a dream. It was not a delirium. It was not just an imagination of a little boy fed with fantastic stories. It was real. Real. Holy shit. Marek? Marek? Something happened? Springlet held his hand, visibly scared. Mark, what's going on? He swallowed hard. Not a dream. Not a dream, Christ. Marek. Man. Should I call the doctor? Something strange was happening to Hofman. He was trembling with fear. He had rationalized it all long ago. Just like that time, as a child, when he saw a combine harvester on the street. A massive, red, improbable machine. It had seemed to him that such a thing couldn't exist. It was too big. But he had watched the faces of the passers-by closely and saw no signs of fear. It's just a harvester, someone explained, noticing the boy's confusion. And it had been the same with this story. Over the years, he'd convinced himself it was just a fantasy. There were no aliens killing holidaymakers in the guest house. Just a gas explosion. He accepted that being almost 5 years old was way too young for him to observe the world rationally. So he must have dreamed it. He'd overheard too many fantastic tales from the older children. Heat stroke, a fire, gas, a loud bang, and the science fiction movies he'd seen some days before. He'd injured his shoulder running through the forest, impaling it on a broken tree branch. There weren't any aliens killing people in Pichiska. There weren't any beings with pipes coming out from their mouths, shooting at humans. There weren't. Jesus Christ. There were. Hofman stared into the face of the man who had parted the bushes and aimed the submachine gun at him. The man was no longer wearing the gas mask with its long pipe to the filter. It was the face Hofman had remembered vividly, etched into every nightmare he'd had for hundreds of nights. God! That was exactly why he had become a police officer, because of the nightmares. He remembered the shot militia officer, remembered how the man hadn't even managed to reach for his holster. Hofman was better. He always carried 2 pistols and a tiny revolver. Those nightmares had shaped his entire life. He became a cop for one reason only, to be able to defend himself. Reckless boy he had been, he'd even joined mercenaries in Chad during the French intervention. They hadn't been deployed, but at least he'd learned how to kill. He could fight with anything, a knife, fists, teeth, his wife's crochet hook, even her lace stocking. But he couldn't fight the nightmares, no matter how much he told himself they weren't real. They were just dreams. And now the nightmare had turned out to be real. Worse, it was horrifyingly, brutally real. He was staring at the face that had haunted him through countless nights. He remembered it perfectly. Jesus Christ! This wasn't just a bad dream. It was the truth. They had killed people in Pichiska. That man. The one who, now without his gas mask, had brushed aside the bushes hiding him. Holding the RAK in his hand, its sights perfectly aligned. Marek? Marek, what's going on? Springlet repeated. Marek! Snap out of it! He buried his face in his hands, trying to pull himself together. Got some water? Jesus, maybe I should call a doctor? I can drive you to the hospital, what do you think? No, thank you. He took a few sips from the glass she handed him. Want to know why you couldn't find anything about him? He was trying to sound rational again. Why? She was clearly intrigued. We made a mistake looking for records in Wrocław and Warsaw, so where should I look? She took a few sips from his glass, intrigued but also sensing they had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Hofman gave her a faint smile. Look in Bydgoszcz. Specifically, Pichiska, 30 kilometers from there. Try to connect those two places and this man. Early 70s. Why Bydgoszcz? How do you know? This time, his smile was harder, more resolute. It just so happens that I'm the only police officer in Poland who knows where to look for anything about this man. Just so happens? A patrol officer escorted Matisik out of the holding cell with a measure of respect befitting a 72-year-old man, a former officer no less. He led him to the investigation officer's office. Behind the desk sat a tall, lean man. His face bore a peculiar detail, his eyes were utterly still and cold. Snake eyes. For a moment, Matisik even thought he had seen him before. But it was only a fleeting sensation. He had an excellent memory for faces and was certain he had never met an officer with eyes as icy as this man's. The man rose from his chair. Marek Hofman, he said, extending a hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Matisik shook his hand lightly. As he sat down in front of the desk, it struck him why the man had seemed faintly familiar. He just has the same eyes as me, he thought with a faint smile to himself. The eyes of a snake. After all, he saw them every day in the mirror while shaving. Springlet excelled at her job. Unfortunately, the results of all her hard work could be summed up in one word: shit, shit, shit. Fabryka Matisik. Pichiska. Bydgoszcz. She glanced at the note Hofman had left. Chatterbox, guest house Peruda. Nothing, nothing, simply nothing. She reached for the phone. Once, this number had been recorded exclusively in the big boss's notebook, due to the highest level of secrecy. Once. Hey, Assie. Hey there, lass, replied Kasia, her counterpart at the Bydgoszcz police headquarters. How can I help? I've got a headache. Early 70s, Pichiska, Bydgoszcz. Fabryka Matisik. Some kind of mess. Classified stuff. Can you find anything, you lovely little ass? Oh, and keywords, chatterbox, Peruda. Okie dokie. I'll call you back in a bit, Kasia sighed. Oh, by the way, some guy just jacked a truck full of smokes. My big boss is losing it. Can you get me some repeat offender from Wrocław that I can pin it on? Okie dokie. I'll pull one up from the records for you. Godspeed, lass. Talk soon. Hofman lit a cigarette. There's something I'd like to understand. You were an officer in the Polish army? Yes, I was. You were a trained marksman? I don't understand. You fired 3 rounds. We have 3 corpses. Your grandson grabbed a Kalashnikov from one of the victims, fired 30 rounds, and only managed to hit the ankle of a guy changing a tire. He's just a kid after all. Can't shoot just yet, Matisik joked. You can? Who's to say? After all, I was an officer. On average, soldiers fire about 6 rounds a year during training. But you? 3 shots, 3 kills. Where do you learn that kind of precision? Let's not exaggerate. One was point blank. The other 2 were from just a few steps away. Do you always bring a TT pistol to a family barbecue? No. Only when I get ambushed by 3 guys with Kalashnikovs. Hofman stubbed out his cigarette, smiling faintly. Well, I'd appreciate some more open discussion. I'd hate to be the only one talking. Feels like I'm a kind of chatterbox. 2 pairs of icily cold eyes locked instantly. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Feels like I'm a kind of chatterbox. Chatterbox. Shit. For the first time, Matisik took the officer leading the investigation seriously. Meanwhile, Hofman realized he wasn't going to get anything out of him. Springlet picked up the phone. The black one, the special one. The headquarters hardware was pretty outdated, so all it took was holding down one of the reels on the large tape recorder with a finger to stop anything from being recorded. Hey there, lass. What's up, Assie? Springlet replied, keeping her finger on the reel. Case number is SW1238272. Classified, Special Protocol. I don't understand shit. Almost nothing written, but got a movie for you, lass. An amateur 8mm. I'll send it to you by courier. Thanks. No problem. Thanks for that, criminal. No biggie. Throw me something else. I've got nothing, no joke. Get in touch with the gal from the capital, I sent you her number. Okie dokie. Stay in touch. Sure. I'll keep digging, but seriously, talk to the Warsaw babe. She'll know more. Super. Thanks. No problemo, lass. Refer to the case number. Cheers. Cheers. Bye-bye. Matisik glanced toward the hazy figure that had appeared near the interrogation room door. Though his expression didn't change, Hofman caught the look. He also glanced to the left, to the side. Nothing. Just a wall plastered with paperwork, a slightly scuffed door, an old linoleum. After a brief moment, their cold gazes locked again. But Matisik's eyes were no longer as calm as before. Could you explain something to me? Hofman lit a second cigarette. One of the investigating officers on your case hanged himself. You don't look like someone who plans to hang himself today, Matisik interrupted. He pulled a disposable tissue from his pocket and carefully wiped his slightly watery eyes. 2 members of the team died in a car accident and another had a heart attack. You don't strike me as someone weak-hearted. So, an accident? Some kind of mafia? I think you're a good driver. I doubt you'd get into an accident. Hofman tapped ash into an overflowing ashtray and grinned wickedly. And if I were to guess what might happen to me? Matisik glanced again at the hazy figure by the door. You won't guess. There's absolutely no way. Damn. Seems despite my sincere wishes, I am the one turning here into a chatterbox. Matisik wiped his eyes again. Chatterbox. He was beginning to appreciate the officer sitting across from him. A flood of memories surged. Did this man actually might know something? No, impossible. But he was clearly up to something. How much had he managed to uncover? And what exactly? No matter. He was in no danger of a heart attack, accident, and definitely not the handmade noose. He seemed tough. But he couldn't possibly know what truly threatened him, because if he did, he wouldn't be having this conversation in the first place. So where had Hofman picked up a scrap of information? How had he connected the dots between the suspect and the case? Holy cow! This was starting to look dangerous. Bringlet, keeping her finger on the reel, made another call. Hi, gal. Hi, lass. What's your deal in the capital? Get me anything you can on SWW's 1238272, okay? Okie dokie, lass. On your screen soon. Big boss asked. No, priv. Okie dokie, I don't care. What, your boy needs data? Yeah. Really? Great. Soon, a moment of silence. Kiddo. Yes? It's fucking classified. Special protocol. So send via secure line. So I will. He. This is some good stuff. Have some really good sex with your boy. Thanks. Cool. At your service, silly ass. Screw yourself, cunt. Thanks for help. That's what we're for, lass. That's what we're for. That's why our fathers fucked our mothers, so that we could help one another now. The worst part of the whole procedure was manually filling out all the paperwork. The facts were clear. Matisik had been attacked by men armed with automatic weapons who held a significant advantage. They weren't law enforcement officers, they hadn't identified themselves, nor, as unanimously testified by all witnesses, did they shout police. No one knew who they were. But what was known was that Matisik's weapon was legal, and the threat was real, so the retired officer had to be released. The case, of course, would drag on, but the senior shooter would be released pending trial, provided he lived long enough to even face it. 72 years old, after all, is no trivia for a male. The paperwork dragged on endlessly, forms to fill, signatures to provide, the deposit to check. Matisik didn't get home until evening. He didn't even touch the dinner his wife had prepared, but asked her for a phone card instead. You could just call from home, she snapped. Probably tapped by now. Then use my cell. Probably an even worse idea. He took the card and walked to the phone booth across from their gate. He well knew the ways the special cases were approached and how the agencies operate. He knew they didn't have the budget to wiretap phone booths. And even if they'd somehow scraped together the funds, it wouldn't be done by today. He quickly dialed a number. Temeki, listening. Get ready. The guy's name is Hofman. He's onto something. Jesus. Don't panic. What's he onto? He knows the code name Chatterbox. Geez. Bidgasks. Pichiska. 67-year-old Temeki's mind worked with ruthless efficiency. Tough men don't get senile. Oh, phoo. Crap. Don't panic, Matisik repeated. No more calls from home phones or mobiles. We're using phone booths. Every second one to the left. The plan had been prepared long ago. After leaving home, each of them could go either left or right. To the left it indicated the direction, and every second referred to which phone booths they'd skip. They already had the phone numbers for the booths written down, along with the contact schedule. Meeting in person wasn't considered, for now. Bye, then. See you, zombie. Don't say that word. Matisik hung up, then picked up the receiver again to call the time service, a taxi company, and a bank to clear the phone booth's memory. Just in case someone was tailing him. He wasn't worried about the booth's call logs. Temeki was undoubtedly already handling that problem. He still had plenty of time. Hofman rolled himself a cigarette with aromatic Red Bull tobacco. He had brought a bottle of semi-sweet white wine from a good French brand, Springlet's favorite one. He had just poured the first round into the glasses. Anya was setting up an 8mm projector. No one at the HQ had such a relic anymore, she had to borrow it from her father-in-law. She handled it quite efficiently, though she still had to rely on the manual as she loaded the reel that had been sent by special courier from Bidgasks. So, should we get it on? Get it on? Hofman muttered. We can get it on, I'm all in. She laughed, picked up her wine glass, sat down next to him, and kissed him on the cheek. "Oh, my willing alpha male," she teased, stroking his neck. "God, how I hate men. And I can't stand women." "Nothing like a heartfelt compliment," she said, taking a sip of wine. "All right, I'm bringing it on." "Not you. I'm on my period and I'm wearing the most unsexy underwear ever, big, massive panties. I don't mind." She turned on the horribly rattling projector. On the sheet stretched over the door of none other than the big boss's own office, blurry, jittery lines appeared first, followed by the tape's production numbers. It wasn't until a moment later that the actual image came into view. Matisik, wearing a military paratrooper helmet, appeared inside some kind of aircraft. The audio immediately desynced. They saw him shouting something, then heard the garbled words, "Documentation to the back." The camera shifted sideways. It showed the lowered entry ramp of a plane slowly taxiing. On the grassy airfield, commandos were retreating, firing at targets off-screen. 4 of them carried a large crate, struggling to get it onto the ramp of the moving plane. Beside them, 2 others ran with an injured comrade supported between their shoulders. Indistinct voices could be heard, drowned out by the relentless clatter of the damn projector. The 4 soldiers in paratrooper helmets finally reached the ramp. They wrestled with the crate, struggling to load it as the pilot showed no signs of slowing. Matisik's voice, delayed by several seconds like a bad dub, shouted, "Come on. Come on. Are these palm trees?" Hofman glanced at Springlet. "They are. What the hell is this? Cuba? A grassy airfield? In Cuba? Hell if I know. What is this? How would I know?" Matisik helped the soldiers push the crate onto the ramp. 2 commandos quickly tossed their wounded comrade in after it. The remaining soldiers stopped firing at their unseen enemy and broke into a frantic run toward the plane, which was preparing for takeoff. The camera jolted violently, making it hard to see details. It seemed the operator didn't sit down until the ramp was closed. Things became clearer when the interior lights flickered on inside the aircraft. One of the soldiers sitting next to Matisik opened a bottle of beer. They clearly saw the brand, Zyweek Brewery. The soldier's mouth moved, and after a delay, distorted by the roar of the engines, his words reached them, "I'm so lucky. A grenade exploded right next to me, yet I'm all good." Suddenly, the man slumped to the floor. A commando knife glinted in his chest. Matisik calmly pulled the bottle from the hand of a dead man who just moments ago had been celebrating his good luck, and took a long swig. Cat. New tape numbers, new shot. A cockpit. Both pilots shouting. The audio was even more delayed compared to the visuals and utterly incomprehensible. The first pilot appeared to be screaming that he wouldn't land this shot-up cow, while Matisik, swearing profusely, was forcing him to land right here. Strange maneuvers, shouting, and completely unintelligible voices from the radio. The roar of the engines filled the air. Matisik said something, while the first pilot seemed paralyzed by fear. Not much could be discerned. It looked like they were landing. The camera jittered wildly, like in Jump in a Jack Flash. Probably taxiing, hell knows. Everything shook. The image was essentially a chaotic flicker of light and shadow. Finally, a stop. The first pilot said something, discernible only by the movement of his lips. Matisik drew his TT pistol and shot him, then shot the second pilot moments later. After a while, the delayed, desynchronized voice of the first pilot finally came through, "I'm so lucky today. Born under a lucky star. Maybe I should buy a lottery ticket." The sound of Matisik's pistol firing once more completely derailed the projector. A feedback loop. The sheet hung on Big Boss's door went black, then white. The tape ended. The tape ended. "What the hell was that?" Hofman asked. "Jesus," whispered Springlet. "I don't know. Damn it. Some shootouts, palm trees." Our guys swiped a big crate and eliminated the witnesses. "Did I see that right, or did I miss something?" "You saw it right, Marek." "Oh, Jesus Christ. What the hell was that?" "I don't know. What have we gotten ourselves into, Marek?" What have we gotten ourselves into? Calm down. Calm down. Jesus Christ. That guy shot both pilots. I saw that right, didn't I? I didn't miss anything, did I? You saw it, springlet. Calm down. What have we gotten ourselves into? Please, calm down. How am I supposed to calm down? She shouted. I've got my period, and now some guy's killing our soldiers, and I think I'm already mixed up in this. How am I supposed to calm down? He poured her more wine. Then he narrowed his sly, wild eyes. I have a feeling this case is going to pull out even bigger surprises, he murmured. Fortunately, she didn't hear him, otherwise, she might have had a full-blown meltdown. For a while, he spoke to her in whispers. He seemed to get through to her, if only slightly. She didn't exactly calm down, but at least she sat still, utterly bewildered. Where did you get that tape? He began his questioning. From the Bydgoszcz precinct. They store stuff like this in Bydgoszcz. No. Back then, film reels were recycled to recover silver. Everything went to Warsaw. Some tapes were destroyed, others repurposed. But, you know, rumors about the silver spread among the staff, and someone from the precinct stole several hundred kilos of reels. Of course, in home conditions, they didn't recover even a gram of silver. That guy got caught recently in some cigarette smuggling scandal involving a truckload of smokes. I gave them some repeat offender to blame, so that no one found out the police were raiding their own warehouses. In the process, we got the tapes back, numbers entered into the system, and that's how I got it. Well, all right. And that case number? SWW something. Where did you get that? Like you said, Pichiska, Bydgoszcz, Chatterbox, a whole mess, early 70s. The Peruda guest house burned down due to a gas cylinder explosion. First responders on the scene? Bydgoszcz Gas Emergency Services. That's what the files say. Problem is, no company by that name exists, never has. The real gas emergency service company is called differently. But here's the funniest part. Go on. Listen, there were a dozen or so casualties, and a huge chunk of pine forest burned down. Know how many fire trucks they sent to the scene? How many? 1. Holy shit. Exactly. You've got to be kidding me. Wild, isn't it? Anya took a sip of her wine. But here's the kicker. A dozen or so victims, guess how many ambulances they called? How many? 0. Hofman downed his wine and set the glass on the desk. So we've got them. Whom? Felikjan Matisik and the other guy who was there. Where? Jesus! In Pichiska, they were the ones killing people there. Like those pilots? Jesus, she hesitated. How could you possibly know that? I was there. Don't mess with me. You must have been, what, 6 or 7 years old then? Almost 5, he said, smiling sweetly at her. What are you talking about? Killing people. Wait, she stopped abruptly, pulling herself together. Wait. What other guy? We only picked up one of them. Hofman reached for the metal box containing the film reel. As he suspected, the operator had signed their name on the paper taped to the lid. I think it's a man named Dariusz Temecki, he said, checking to ensure he had deciphered the handwriting correctly. One of the very few people I know who won't even flinch when people are being killed right next to them. He smiled again. This time, it was a vicious smile. Felikjan Matisik sat at the kitchen table, eating sandwiches his elderly wife had prepared for dinner and washing them down with strong tea. Oh, fuck, he thought. Oh, fuck. He didn't care much for life anymore. At some point, he had made peace with everything, made peace with the idea of putting a bullet in his own head if things didn't work out. But now, there was this damned old age. That hideous, wretched state where a person, against all reason, against everything, suddenly begins clinging to life. A life full of pain, devoid of opportunities, grey, stupid, and without prospects. Old age is degenerative. Suddenly, all that matters is one thing: life itself. No matter how lousy, as long as it exists. It's as if a free person is slowly stripped of everything: money, love, sex, women, optimistic thoughts about the future, any kind of hope. They turn you into some horrible, trembling old man, often unable to hold his urine in bed, forgetting where he put his house keys, vomiting if he eats too much lunch, farting at every opportunity. You have nothing left. Shaking hands covered in liver spots. Eyes that ooze. Speech garbled by dentures. No young woman finds you desirable anymore. But the desires are still there. Fate has just taken away your ability to fulfill them. Fuck. When will he put on his first Pampers? The first of his life, since he missed out on that product as a baby. It wasn't available then. When will he go to social services for his first pair of vinyl underpants? But no. He was different. Life was life, but there was still the matter at hand. He'd put a bullet in his head once. He has to. But not before. Definitely not before. He glanced at the foggy silhouette standing in the corner of the kitchen. And what about that fucking police boy? He muttered, scattering crumbs across the tabletop. We'll deal with him. Hofman browsed through the CD of data sent by Springlet's colleague from Warsaw. Not much material there. Worse yet, without audio. He started with a video, digitized from a classic 8mm into an MPEG. This time, there was no metal box to check for the operator's signature. Not that it would have mattered, the footage was just as poorly shot as the previous reel. First shot, a tank positioned in the middle of a road. Probably AT-55? Hofman wasn't sure. Military vehicles weren't his specialty. Soldiers stuck out of the hatches, looking more bored than stressed. 6 figures in OP-1 chemical suits with flamethrowers strapped to their backs were casually dousing a lawn in flames. They moved slowly, methodically, almost lazily. An officer in full dress uniform stood about 40 paces away. The footage was fragmented and choppy. Nothing significant seemed to be happening. Then suddenly, a change. The officer raised a whistle to his lips, ostensibly in panic. The men in OP-1 suits, the ones with the flamethrowers, bolted. One stumbled and fell. Something snagged him, a wire near the roadside, invisible through the tiny lenses of his gas mask, or maybe a branch. He tumbled into a ditch. The tank, reversing, its tread slipping on the asphalt, slammed into a post with some sort of sign on it. Both soldiers in the turret immediately ducked down and sealed the hatches. The tank maneuvered awkwardly before retreating further in reverse. The officer with the whistle ran like a startled hare, leaping over low fences in the field. The camera operator backed away, and the footage grew increasingly shaky. Disjointed, unclear shots followed, a jeep attempting to turn around on a narrow road. 2 soldiers retreating by the book, moving backward with their Kalashnikovs aimed at something still off-screen, beyond the frame. The tank smashed into a power pole, tearing down overhead lines. Sparks flew. Cat. A different time of day, judging by the change in lighting. Several men in OP-1 suits were now burning another figure in the same type of suit, probably the one who had fallen into the ditch during the earlier retreat. This time, the wire wrapped around his wrist was clearly visible. His suit was torn. Flames engulfed him. The end. What is this? What the hell is this? Hofman flipped through the scans of documents. Nothing. Just scraps of information, fragments of papers that had clearly been combed through by someone. SWW 233999169, the effect in Sclery. What the hell is this effect? He kept searching. There it was. SWW 1238272, the effect in Pichiska. Gas explosion. Patrol number 7 dispatched. Please? You wouldn't trick a kid with this crap. A gas explosion and Bydgosk's regional command calls in a patrol? That doesn't even sound like proper militia terminology. And Matisik was a soldier, not a cop. They called in the military for a gas explosion? This story was full of holes. They sent just one fire truck, with no investigation team and no ambulance. This reeks. All right. Time to move on. Rocklaw, he muttered, whistling softly. SRTs 2456-3001. The abbreviation rang a bell. Jesus. SRT? Hofman had a sharp memory for numbers and names. But SRT? What was the SRT series about? Wait, archival stuff, maybe? He couldn't quite put his finger on it. SRT? He logged into the police command's computer. From this level, he only had a general view of the information. The SRT series, gas explosions, sudden gusts of wind, mining disasters. Jesus Christ! Now he remembered. The SRT series. The gas explosion at the PKO Bank Rotunda in Warsaw. Wind collapsing the unfinished Agricultural Academy building in Rocklaw, nearly 40 victims. A gas explosion in Gdansk, dozens buried under rubble. A slag heap sliding onto a bridge in Walbridge, almost 30 dead. He had learned about all these during his studies, as examples of poorly organized militia operations. Holy shit! Now he understood. This wasn't a poorly organized militia operation. It was a perfectly executed military operation where almost 30 people were killed. But wait. He lit a cigarette and walked to the window. The summer night carried scents of warm asphalt, ivy-covered building walls, and flowers from the nearby park. Lost in thought, he watched the street lamps cast fantastical shadows on the road, the villas across the way, and the insects swarming around the sources of light. From the beautiful building next door, someone was playing the piano. He could also hear the sounds of several TVs through open windows, and somewhere nearby, a loud argument. City life. The TV in his own living room was on as well. His wife was watching her daily dose of news, stories of break-ins, robberies, armed assaults, rapes. How could they maintain a massive organization capable of killing people all over the country? That would mean hundreds of patrols, central command centers, some kind of staff, and a communication network. Could they possibly keep that a secret? The answer was simple: they couldn't. Which led to one conclusion: the group had to be very small, composed of carefully selected specialists. But even in that case, how could they respond immediately to incidents in various parts of the country and carry out lightning-fast extermination operations? Again, the answer was simple: they couldn't. So, what's the conclusion? Hofman took a long drag from his cigarette. If they had such a small, almost microscopic team with the backing of someone high up and yet were able to manage all the so-called effects, then the conclusion was obvious. They must have known, at least approximately, where and when an effect would occur. They sent people to those general areas in advance. And that reeked badly. Damn it! The lights in his house suddenly went out. Is it the fuses? His wife called out from the now dark living room. Hofman leaned out the window and glanced at the side of his building. No, the whole building seems to be out. Oh God. All right, let's just go to bed. He grunted something non-committal and picked up the phone. But he wasn't calling the electric company. Hey, man. Did I wake you? One of his friends, an architect, answered, yawning loudly. No, he lied politely. Tell me something, how hard is it to blow up a residential block? What block? Any block. For instance, the one I live in. Assume it'd be tricky to bring in a large quantity of explosives. You know. In secret. Okay. Blowing up your block wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't even need Semtex. What would you need? Another ear-splitting yawn from the architect. A number 14 wrench. What? A number 14 wrench. Jesus! Don't tell me you could blow up my building with just one wrench. Of course I could. How? Wait, what wrench are you even talking about? A regular 14. I'd just go down to the basement. As an architect, the janitor would have to let me in. All I'd have to do is claim there's a structural failure. What kind of failure? Let's assume the building's still intact. God. You don't know our jargon. A structural failure could just mean I think I noticed, let's say, a crack in the foundation wall. Think I noticed, you understand? They'd have to let me in everywhere, because I'd then be required to investigate and notify the appropriate authorities. Standard procedure. All right. And what would you do with the wrench? I'd loosen the gas valve in the basement. 20 meters away, I'd leave a lit cigarette or a candle and then run like hell in a zigzag. Just quickly. Jesus, it's that simple. Simple as can be. Another yawn. You don't know how large panel system works, do you? He explained briefly that concrete buildings had one distinct feature. In the event of bombings, like during World War II, the damage would be far less than what occurred in the Third Reich. A bomb dropped from above wouldn't do much to these concrete bunkers, which residential blocks essentially were. But an explosion from below would cause them to collapse in on themselves. A 14 wrench and a candle were more effective weapons than blockbuster bombs or planes crashing into the sides of the WTC. Cheaper, easier to handle, portable, user-friendly. A 14 wrench was the equivalent of several tons of TNT. You obviously also need gas, and a candle or a cigarette. And some matches. Springlet was walking Podwell Street towards the bus stop. A straight, short, and well-lit road stretched from Likowa to Swidnica Streets, ending at the stop near the shopping mall. On one side were offices, department stores, and apartments, on the other, an empty expanse of greenery, a moat, an open space. But something was off. 2 in the morning was hardly a typical time for solitary walks by women anyway, but now something was truly wrong. Springlet didn't have a firearm in her service handbag, just a small canister of pepper spray. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a hazy silhouette in one of the doorways. It looked like an unreal figure made of mist. She never gave in to stereotypical female panic. She had undergone a few training sessions and knew exactly what to do in situations like this. She quickened her pace, trying to project an air of determination. The rhythmic tapping of her heels against the pavement was deliberate and steady. After all, a man formed of mist couldn't exist. She didn't believe in ghosts, and surely, semi-transparent men did not exist in the real world, right? She shifted slightly to the left as she passed the doorway and said lightly, "Oh, good evening. Mr. Michalski, isn't it?" Another turn, further to the left. Her right hand gripped the pepper spray, while her left reached for her phone. With the same hand, she slipped a curved metal crochet hook into her mouth. That was her plan in case of a court case. If she had a knife, the court would be more inclined to consider she was the one to attack, but an attacker with a crochet hook. Laughable, and still one could pierce a skull with it. She was prepared for both attack and defense, feeling grateful for her past training. Her steps were quick and purposeful. No glances backward, except, of course, for a few feigned ones, pretending to check if something was wrong with her right heel. The misty figure seemed to be following her. She couldn't see clearly. But it seemed. Dear God! It was getting closer. She tucked her phone under her blouse so the attacker wouldn't notice the screen or keypad lighting up. Using muscle memory, she dialed 997. Her pace was quick but measured, no running yet. Once the phone's backlight dimmed, she pulled it out from under her blouse and held it to her ear. This is Senior Sergeant Anna Nowicka. Assault. I need assistance. PDT bus stop. Officer in danger. She sprayed the misty figure just behind her with pepper spray. With 2 sharp kicks, she shed her high-heeled shoes and broke into a sprint toward the stop. Dear God! Only 3 people at this hour, 2 women and a drunkard. No help in sight. Officer in danger. Send everything you've got in the area. Did you hear me? They're on their way, came the voice on the line. Shoot! Shoot! I have nothing to shoot with. They'll be there in seconds. Hang on. The drunk staggered toward her. Come on, sweetie. Maybe we can get cozy? Thankfully, the precinct wasn't far. 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt beside her, tires burning against the asphalt. Several officers, weapons drawn, jumped out. Anna raised her hand. "It's me." Her other hand held her badge. The officers surrounded her. The drunkard hit the pavement without a sound under the weight of 2 heavily muscled, adrenaline-charged officers. "It's not him," she shouted, pointing toward Podwell Street. 2 officers, armed and equipped with flashlights, sprinted in that direction. The women at the bus stop stood frozen in shock. The drunkard on the sidewalk mumbled incoherently. 3 cars for a little harassment? The world's gone to hell. He struggled to his feet. This is worse than Auschwitz. Unfortunately, the officers returned empty-handed a few minutes later, carrying only her shoes, the only thing they'd found. She lit a cigarette. "Can you take me home, boys?" "Of course." "Sure. We'll stick around outside your place for a while, just to be safe." Who would dare refuse an assistant to the big boss himself? In the cruiser, Springlet scrolled through her phone book and dialed her colleague. "Marek," she said, "something is very wrong." "Very, very wrong," she repeated. "Be prepared for the worst." Hofman hung up the phone. He knew perfectly well that something was wrong. And it wasn't just the power outage that had plunged the entire building into darkness. His snake's mind, his scorpion's mind, had long been warning him that danger was approaching. From his safe, he retrieved a weapon, the safest choice for an apartment with concrete walls, a precision revolver with a 6-inch barrel, caliber .22. Into the first chamber of the cylinder, he loaded a CCI shotshell cartridge, one designed to blind an attacker by taking out their eyes. The remaining chambers were loaded with Eli cartridges containing lead bullets designed to avoid ricochets. It was the safest possible setup for indoor shooting. He didn't want to harm his own family. He stubbed out his cigarette and began changing into his pajamas. He'd made the right choice, a 6-inch barrel, small caliber, safe ammunition, a recoil deflector. A precision masterpiece that wouldn't harm anyone except an assailant. And after firing in a room, hearing could be recovered within 15 minutes. The shotshell and lead rounds were designed to embed into walls rather than ricochet wildly around the apartment. The entire block, and perhaps even the quarter, was plunged into pitch-black darkness. The absolute, disorienting kind of darkness unimaginable to a city dweller. Considering the message from Springlet, Hofman held the revolver in a safe grip and headed to the bedroom. Even if he stumbled in the dark, the way the gun was positioned made an accidental discharge impossible. In the bedroom, he saw something utterly unbelievable. His wife, a rather stunning blonde, was standing there completely naked. In one hand, she held her cell phone, and in the other, the landline receiver. From the receiver came the repetitive beep, beep, beep of a line left idle for too long without dialing. Reflexively, as much as he could see anything in the dark, his eyes focused on her hips. "Check if the door's locked," she said. "What?" "Check if the door's locked." He stepped back into the hallway and checked the 2 massive locks and the chain. His wife had been obsessive about this ever since her friend had been murdered. They'd beaten and kicked her so professionally that it took her 4 hours to die, choking on her own blood in the end. He returned to the bedroom. "It's all good. Something's going to happen. I've got beer in the fridge. Want one?" "You won't make it to the kitchen," she replied, still in a calm tone. Actually, he was not stressed yet. Sure, he had all of Springlet's stories and the TV news about local break-ins in the back of his mind, but he had a metal pipe under the bed, a precaution he'd taken since that friend had been beaten to death, as it had shaken even him. Apparently, she'd screamed, but the neighbors had thought it was just a domestic argument. And besides, he still felt like a macho with his revolver in hand. "Relax. Let's just go to sleep." "Turn around," said his naked wife. Only then did he start to feel something. He shifted the gun from a safe position to a deadly dangerous one, stock in hand, finger on the trigger, thumb on the hammer. Turning around, he was gripped by paralyzing fear. But his mind stayed sharp, racing through thoughts, What could they do to me? If it comes to it, I'll dive behind the bed and start firing. A second later, a stupid realization hit him: the ammunition's in the safe. I only have 6 rounds. But almost immediately, he calmed himself: either I handle 2 of them, or I'm done for, since there won't be time to reload anyway. His thoughts spiraled: regret for not taking a large-caliber pistol to create a wall of fire, mixed with relief that he'd been rational, sticking to his training. A revolver was less likely to harm his family in a panic, and a small-caliber one was 100 times safer and more precise. But had he really checked the door? Of course he had. He just had a look. Why hadn't he grabbed a candle? Where was the chemical light stick? He wouldn't make it to the metal pipe under the bed. His wife was blocking the way. Idiotic swirl of thoughts blended with paralyzing fear. Fortunately, his brain was still working. He could also rely on his instincts. He steadied his breathing, trying to think of how to improve his tactical position. He pulled the duvet off the bed and approached the bedroom door. "Don't go out," his wife said. "Relax," he replied. And then something utterly impossible happened. Someone was coming through the door. His wife let out a strange sound, a mix between a squeak and a guttural rasp. He felt the urge to start shooting wildly into the darkness out of sheer terror. Someone was passing through the door. The front door. It wasn't scratching, knocking, or the sound of forced entry. It was as if someone was squeezing through a door locked with 2 heavy bolts and a chain. Paralyzing fear, an instinct saved him again. He calmed his breathing, piled the duvet against the bedroom door, and took up a defensive position. Scene like one from an Italian movie: a man in his underwear holding a revolver, a naked woman clutching 2 phones, and a child suddenly thrashing in her sleep as if caught in a nightmare. She whimpered, tossed, and let out soft cries. Their daughter was sleeping on the top bunk of a bunk bed. Hofman considered climbing the ladder, but immediately realized it would be a mistake. As a right-hand man, his body would block the weapon from any potential attacker. He froze in place, unsure of what to do. And then they heard it. Someone, or something, was moving through the hallway, but it wasn't the sound of footsteps. Something was sliding? Crawling? His wife began to cry. Hofman's mind went back to the pistol he had left in the safe. Heart pounding, hair standing on end, he moved toward the bedroom door. "Don't go out. I'll check it out." "Nothing's happening." "Relax, I checked the door." "No." He couldn't calm his breathing. "I'm about to blow his ass off." Nerves fraying, he made a critical mistake. He turned to face his wife, leaving his back to the door. His naked wife suddenly said, in a completely calm voice, "He's standing in the doorway." 2 worse moments. He spun around in panic, pulling back the hammer of the revolver. There was no one in the doorway. But he knew. He knew something was there. The child cried out in her sleep, twisting and turning as if trying to escape from something in dreams. The woman repeated in the same perfectly calm tone, "He's standing in the doorway." He couldn't see anyone, but he knew something was there. Absolute darkness, not a thing visible. "I'll shoot." "Don't shoot." The same absurdly calm tone. The child was thrashing wildly in bed, and no one could move. He didn't know how long they stood there, paralyzed by fear, breaking the tension only with their ridiculous exchange, "I'll shoot." "Don't shoot." "It won't do anything." "What's with the child?" "Jesus, I don't know." "Are you calling?" "Where?" "For backup, call the police." "Dial a number at least." "I can't turn off that damn beeping." "Use your cell." "Jesus." "What's the number?" 997. No, damn it. Maybe 112. "Where's the 1? "I can't see the keys." "Press any key." "The light will come on." They carried on this absurd conversation, fully aware that whoever, or whatever, it was remained in the doorway of the bedroom. Their daughter screamed hysterically, pausing only occasionally for brief moments of silence. No one dared move to check on her. And then, suddenly, the intruder backed. The child calmed down and fell into a peaceful sleep. Hofman felt the revolver in his hand growing unbearably heavy. His wife put the phones down. Just like that. Abruptly. Without explanation. It was bizarre. Hofman went to the kitchen to get that beer, certain now that nothing is lurking in the apartment anymore, but he didn't feel like drinking any longer. He sat on the floor, the cold metal of the gun pressed against his forehead. At that very moment, Springlet was falling asleep in her bed. Outside, police officers in a patrol car kept watch by the building's gate. On her nightstand, her service pistol lay loaded and cocked, ready for use. Just before she drifted off, as her thoughts began to blur and tumble uncontrollably, one story lingered in her mind, that of an American woman. The woman kept two things under her pillow, a revolver and an asthma inhaler. One night, in a moment of confusion, she mistook the revolver for the inhaler. Instead of placing the inhaler to her lips, she slid the barrel of the gun into her mouth. And instead of pressing the button to release the medicine, she pulled the trigger. Thoughts always stray wildly just before sleep. Springlet had tossed her own inhaler into the kitchen. Do or die. She wondered if she would even remember this decision during an asthma attack. Fuck this, do or die. They wouldn't take her alive. Whatever. Springlet was desperately lonely. She knew that if anything appeared in her bedroom, she'd start firing at it, or at herself. She didn't care. She was damned lonely. One more sip of vodka, and then off to sleep. As long as she didn't mistake the bottle for the barrel or the cap for the trigger. And that aside, she didn't care. The mist-like figure appeared again, this time without any additional effects. Hofman sat on the kitchen floor, struggling to swallow the now warm beer. It tasted awful. He glanced at the man woven from mist and lazily raised the barrel of his revolver, only to lower it again. He didn't care anymore. He muttered. You know me, said the misty figure. Hofman couldn't tell if he'd actually heard a sound or if it was just something speaking in his head. Really? At least he spoke aloud, though quietly. Yes. You've heard my nickname. Second-hand. From stories. Hofman lifted his head. Horrific memories from his childhood surfaced. Chatterbox? Yes, Marek, it whispered. After a moment, it added, Hi, Snake. Can we talk for a bit? Why do you call me Snake? Take a look in the mirror at your eyes, predator. They're fucking vicious. Two cops from the patrol car were promising the leading officer for the 5th time. I'm swearing on God, we didn't fall asleep. The moment we heard gunshots, Chris ran up the stairs, and I called for backup and followed him. No one entered the building, no one left. This building has only one entrance. The other one, leading to the courtyard, was blocked by a wardrobe. I know. No one fell asleep. When the backup patrol cars arrived, I ran to check the other exit. It was still blocked by the wardrobe. How is it possible for two officers to be peacefully sleeping just steps from the entrance after what happened last night? We weren't asleep. All conversations are recorded. Someone chases the boss's secretary, 3 patrol cars show up, 1 takes her home, and you 2 fall asleep on the job? Are you kidding me? We didn't fall asleep. As soon as we heard the gunshots, Chris. Springlet had managed to fire 5 shots. 4 of them tore into the walls, ricocheting wildly around the room, cheap Czech ammunition bouncing unpredictably in all directions. The 5th shot was more precise. Springlet shot herself in the head. And it wasn't a mistake, she really didn't confuse the gun with her inhaler. She should get a medal, posthumously. What's up, Snake? They were walking through Southern Park at 5 in the morning. The paths were deserted, with no one around except the occasional hedgehog scurrying by, squirrels darting through the trees, or a distant rabbit. No one could see a man talking to a woman made of mist. Listen, Chatterbox, you've been dead for, like, 30 years. Why does that bother you so much? Well, you know. It's not every day you talk to the dead. Don't take it so seriously. Alive, dead. What difference does it make? Don't piss me off, you damned corpse, he said with a smirk. She laughed too, though he wasn't entirely sure if it was out loud or something only he could hear. Snake, she whispered, I like you. He glanced at her, or at least at the misty form he referred to as a her. Tell me. How is it even possible that you? He hesitated. I don't know how to put this. That you're alive? At least, in some sense. It's damn hard to explain. I don't fully understand it myself. Well, surely you can tell me something? Listen, it's not that simple. It's... No, you listen, you damn corpse. I have this strange feeling that you're a fantastic girl. He stopped and lit a cigarette. But I'm also absolutely certain, he exhaled a puff of smoke, that you're hiding something from me. Thanks for the first part, she said. And as for the second? You're right. Are you going to tell me? She smiled sadly, if you could call it a smile, and if sadness could even be discerned in a wisp of mist. I'll tell you. Because I know how you'll react. What does my reaction have to do with it? He asked. Because it's bad news. She stopped by a small bench. But you'll handle it. What happened? Springlit's dead. Damn it. Something clenched in his gut. For a moment, he felt paralyzing loneliness, fear, and utter confusion. Faint memories from his childhood surfaced, times when he'd felt lost and afraid of everything around him. He sat on the bench, took a drag from his cigarette, but it tasted terrible. He flicked it onto the path. Then he lifted his head. He was himself again. Who? He asked. Ghosts probably don't feel fear, but Chatterbox instinctively took a step back. Hofman repeated softly, Who did it? She smiled. I knew you'd react like this. I knew I could tell you calmly. Can't you answer a simple question? I don't know who. But I'll help you find him. Hofman desperately needed a beer or a strong coffee, something to steady his nerves. They are already dead, he said quietly. I know, Chatterbox laughed. That's exactly why I came to you and not some random guy straight from the yellow pages. Help me get to him, being from another world. Okie dokie, Chatterbox said, echoing Springlit's favorite phrase. But they're planning to kill you too. You already know too much. We tried to warn Springlit, but it didn't work. And? Tell me one thing. What? When we find this guy, will you kill him? Can you? He gave her a cruel, crooked smile, looking straight into her eyes. Even though they were partially transparent, she clearly caught his gaze. Let's roll, he said, repeating the famous line. He reflexively put a cigarette in his mouth, even though he didn't feel like smoking. He spat it onto the path. Let's roll. Chatterbox grinned just as cruelly. Okie dokie. Let's roll, Snake. Matisic stood in a phone booth, pretending to read a newspaper marked with job ads for retirees. It was a cover, just in case someone was tailing him. He wasn't looking for work, he was doing just fine financially. Tameki, in a separate booth, answered immediately. Their schedule had been meticulously planned in advance. Well? It is becoming active again. I see that. They'll want to eliminate it. Once again. And us, while they're at it. What do you suggest? There's this officer on the police force. Matisic ran his finger along the job listings in the paper. Hofman, I mentioned him to you last time. I swear I know him from somewhere. Come on. You don't remember? You've got the best memory for faces I've ever seen. Exactly. And I can't figure it out. Then you must have seen him on TV. Maybe he was on a game show. Or in a segment about heroic cops busting a gang so hard the crooks' crayon spilled out of their backpacks. This is serious. I know him. I remember those eyes. Temeki just sighed. What the crap do we need some lousy cop for? He's a snake. No shit. I'm serious. A moment of silence. Fine then, bring him in. Another pause, longer this time. Listen, what if our stuff comes to light in the process? In that case, Dec, we'll have our next meeting in hell. The big boss was losing his mind in his office. Literally losing it. The senior officers of the Rockler Police HQ gathered around him, trembling with fear. They had never seen their commander in such a state. What the hell is this? He bellowed. What the bloody hell is this? Not one of them dared utter a single word. My personal assistant goes home, exhausted from OT. At 2 fucking a.m. She reports over the phone that she's being attacked. She reports it to you, you morons. And what happens? 2 idiots drive her home, then fall asleep in the patrol car, and then some assholes kill her. Kill her. A police officer, my assistant, a liaison with the spec, he abruptly cut himself off mid-sentence. They killed her, he resumed a moment later. It was suicide, someone brave, or foolish, muttered. It was as if Big Boss had been whipped. He instantly calmed down, walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. Gentlemen, follow me, they heard him say from outside the office. They shuffled out, deflated, not particularly eager. They tried not to meet Big Boss's eyes, but he was perfectly composed now. Here are the stairs, he said. See? I'm walking down the stairs. He made theatrical movements, stepping heavily. Thud, 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 he said in an eerily calm tone with each step. And down these stairs, I'll send your heads rolling. They'll bounce on the steps, tumble, roll, crash. He abruptly turned and headed back up to the office. A suicide, gentlemen, does not fire 4 shots into the walls. A suicide does not shoot at someone 4 times before putting a bullet in their own head, and as you know, the sheer sound of a 9mm round fired in an enclosed space is enough to dissuade even the most determined of would-be suicides. The officers weren't entirely convinced. After all, the most common military suicides involve 2 or 3 shots into the air from a Kalashnikov before finally aiming at oneself. But that was in the open, with trained sentries. Anna Nauika wasn't a good shot. Other than basic firearms training, at a range, with glasses and noise-cancelling headphones, she hadn't had any additional experience. Follow me, gentlemen, Big Boss said, appearing unnervingly composed as he walked down the corridor. Most of the officers knew where he was leading them, to the Jewish Passage, a place surrounded by legend. It was an exceptionally steep, narrow spiral staircase in the corner of the building, with absurdly small steps. Old people used to say that the Gestapo had supposedly stood Jewish prisoners at the top before kicking them down the stairs. A falling person had no chance of stopping themselves until they hit the bottom. Unfortunately, the only piece of evidence supporting that legend was a Star of David etched into the glass of the door in the old Nazi-era building. Big Boss opened the door to that very staircase. He bent down and touched the steps with his finger. Oh, here's the first step. Here's the second. His finger moved lower, and here's the third. Your heads, gentlemen, will roll down these very steps as well. But you have an alternative solution. Big Boss straightened up slowly, almost laboriously. I want the head of Ms. Nauika's murderer served to me on a golden platter, on my desk, in my office. He turned and started walking back down the corridor. Better start chipping in for that golden platter, boys, he added, not bothering to look back. That is, of course, if you still see your future in this department. Big Boss was well known for his eccentricities and sharp humor. But somehow, this time, no one laughed. At the entrance to the morgue, Hofman first had to fill out about half a ton of paperwork. Naturally, if he snatched a dead man's watch, the police would immediately know where to start looking. Not that the corpses in the morgue had any watches left, but who could say? Maybe an officer might pull out someone's gold teeth instead? And they'd have him right away, thanks to the 300 forms he had to sign. They walked among the tables holding the bodies. The misty chatterbox suddenly burst out laughing. "I feel right at home here," she said. "Like I'm at a party with old friends." Hofman snorted with laughter. The pathologist leading them shot him a glance. What the fuck's so funny in a morgue? He couldn't see or hear Chatterbox. "You know, I guess it's the fact that I'm here. But alive. Always nice to stand out, right?" The doctor didn't even bother to look at him again. He pulled out 3 drawers from the fridge, uncovering the feet of the corpses. "I didn't learn much. But fortunately, there's one distinctive detail. Notice that the 3 men who attacked Mr. He tried to recall. Mr. Felikjan Matisik all had one thing in common. They're circumcised, red-haired, and all used to be cyclists or barbers. What's got you so chipper today?" "I'm always like this when someone murders my closest colleague." Hofman placed his hand on the grip of his pistol. "I just love the smell of burnt nitrocellulose in the morning." The pathologist was all too familiar with that scent. He knew the acrid odor of rounds fired from semi-automatic weapons. It had seeped into the many bodies he'd examined. It was a smell unmistakable with anything else. The 3 who attacked Mr. Matisik share a peculiar trait. They all have similar calluses on their heels. Like this. He pointed with his finger. Military boots. Paratrooper boots. Commandos. I know. Oh? Have you seen ones like those before? 2 men were waiting by the exit of the morgue. Chatterbox was laughing while dancing between them. They couldn't see her, so she sang loudly, with only one person that could hear her around. "Here they are, Snake. Waiting for you. One's to my right, the other a bit behind me, at my 7 o'clock. Over." Hofman chambered a round in his pistol. "One mistake and you're dead, Snake." "Over." He nodded. "Can you handle it? They really mean to kill you." "Over." "Yeah." "Over and out," Hofman said, raising his weapon. He broke into a run, shouting, "Police! Hands up!" Chad was terrible. Young Hofman had signed up through a recruitment office in Italy while on vacation, out of spite toward his parents, who had forbidden him from working on oil rigs in Norway. Because it's too dangerous. So, in defiance, he joined the safer ranks of mercenaries in Chad. He was supposed to earn $3,000 a month. Fortunately for him, there were no actual combat missions. All those absurd formations were quickly disbanded and sent back to Italy, where the soldiers' passports suddenly became worth something again. Chad was terrible. It wasn't just the hellish climate, the dirt, the stench, or the panic-inducing stories from his new comrades. For instance, one guy who slept on the bunk next to him developed some kind of rash. Pimples covered his entire body, every millimeter of it. Literally everywhere. At first, the guys slathered him with petroleum jelly because that's all they had. Hofman, terrified of catching whatever it was, applied it using a tissue. Eventually, they dragged the poor guy to the aid station, a place with completely unpronounceable, for a Pole, French name. It was a French first aid tent, or perhaps just a latrine. They were never quite sure, as its facilities rivaled the opulence of a typical public toilet in Europe. There, someone applied a different ointment, or possibly toilet cleaner, it wasn't clear. The next day, the guy, on the brink of death, was flown to France. It was quite some fun when one other time some guy stepped on a landmine. Half the camp rushed over, and everyone was shouting something. Hofman, along with 2 Germans, bandaged the wounded man with whatever they could find. Since everyone at that hour was walking around in nothing but their underwear, there weren't even any clothes handy to use as bandages. Hofman's personal contribution to the advancement of global medicine was the world's first bandage made out of old newspaper. The guy wasn't bleeding too badly, fortunately. Later, a shaker-legged doctor arrived, glanced briefly at the injured man, and quashed any hope Hofman might have had of winning the Nobel Prize in Medicine for his groundbreaking discovery in extreme wound care. Whatever? "I'll cut off his legs in the evening," the doctor said, and drifted off in a direction known only to himself, leaving the soldiers still discussing the accident. Hofman had never seen such chaos in his life, and he could only dream about those promised $3,000 a month. But compared to the locals, he had money to burn. He was as wealthy as King Nebuchadnezzar, as rich as the wealthiest citizen of Sybaris. He could do anything: party, drink, buy all sorts of illegal goods, all for next to nothing. In the mercenary camp, evenings were laid back. Anyone who wanted to could go out and blow their tips, as they called them. To the local population, these tips were mountains of gold, millions of dollars in value. Allegedly, 2 drunk Poles pulled out handfuls of local currency in a bar and said to the bartender, "Bring your daughter here and have her cut herself with a knife." "We'll pay this," they said, pointing to the pile of cash. Supposedly, she came and cut herself. Supposedly. Who believes mercenary stories? Supposedly, a drunk German shot someone, and when the crowd gathered, he plugged the victim's wound with a wad of banknotes and walked off calmly. His only fear was being trampled by those scrambling for the cash. Supposedly. It's better not to take mercenary tales seriously. The fact that Hofman saw, the next day in a hospital, or at least the place bearing that proud name, a girl with knife wounds and a guy with a gunshot wound doesn't prove anything. Nothing happened. He never talked about Chad afterward, and for a few reasons. Mainly to avoid being punished for serving in a foreign army. But people are people. Eventually, something slips out at a party or to a favorite girl. And he was always asked why, if he'd served in the French military, he didn't speak a word of the language. Though the truth was quite the opposite, he knew plenty of French words. For example, "OUI, voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir," and a few other dirty phrases, and "fuck off you stupid frojita," to be delivered with the proper accent. He had never had a need for any others. The mercenaries were almost all Poles, Germans, a handful of Yugoslavians, a couple of Czechs, and some Brit or New Zealander, or who knows. All commands were given in Polish or German, like "Stillgestanden, Kurwa." No one understood the locals' dialects anyway. For the locals, the sound of rustling banknotes was all that mattered, and with that, you could get whatever you wanted. For example, a can of cola bought at the market for the disabled and handicapped. Hofman once bought one for the equivalent of 2 American cents. He drank it on the spot because the armless vendor seemed to expect it. Later, his comrades rescued him, claiming the locals could even fake factory-sealed cans, and who knew what kind of bacteria might be inside. They tried to disinfect him with pure alcohol, but it didn't work because they didn't have any, and someone pointed out that pure alcohol in this heat could kill a European. So, vodka it was. That turned out to be fun, and the party celebrating the brand new corpse in their unit was a great success. But the training was fucking difficult. The punishments were brutal too, like cleaning an oil tank or sitting inside a metal barrel under the blazing sun. People screamed, literally howled. The turning point came much later. During a field exercise, their reconnaissance team captured a local. Panic broke out over the possibility of journalists or photographers showing up, so they were handling him decently. But as the man didn't look like a journalist or photographer, the detaining guys had already roughed him up. His hands were tied, his face was bloody, and fluid dripped from his nose and ear. The sergeant gave them a clear order: interrogate the prisoner. But how the hell were they supposed to do that? In Polish? What were they supposed to say? The sergeant's intentions were clear. Interrogate him, he said, pointing to one of the soldiers. The soldier understood immediately and punched the man in the face. Okay, the sergeant said, uninterested in the results of this interrogation. Next. The second soldier drove his fist into the man's solar plexus, doubling him over in agony. Your turn, the sergeant said, nodding toward Hofman. Ah. This was the moment to prove himself. To show his comrades he wasn't just cannon fodder but a man. Hofman pulled a cable from his pocket, threaded with metal sleeves, something that always made a strong impression in the bar near the barracks. The cable hissed menacingly as he whipped it through the air. And then, Hofman felt something new, something he had never experienced before. In his exhaustion, numbness, and amidst the stench of sweat, a thought burrowed into his mind, stubborn and unrelenting. "No," he said, putting the cable back into his pocket. "What do you mean, no?" "I won't hit a tied-up man," he shouted, a little too loudly. "What?" "I won't hit an unarmed guy." "You won't turn me into an animal." For a moment, the sergeant stared at him wide-eyed, and Hofman saw every possible punishment flash before his eyes: cleaning the oil tank, solitary confinement in the metal barrel under the blazing sun. "You won't turn me into an animal," he repeated. The old sergeant, a crude and primitive man, yet one who some claimed still remembered Anders' army, stepped closer, his expression shifting. He chewed something over internally for a long moment, smacking his lips, biting his lip, clearly grappling with something. There was always something off about those men from the Second Corps. Too long in the army. Finally, he spoke. "I just have." He looked Hofman straight in the eyes. "I just turned you into an animal. Ha, ha, ha. Into a predator." He laughed and cracked jokes, but the surrounding soldiers didn't understand a thing. Then, after a moment, he snapped back to the situation. "All right," he muttered. "But you stood up to me. I reckon. 1. 100. Now." The word reckon meant Hofman had to take off his short-brimmed hat and put on the steel helmet, nicknamed the brain oven, and then run ahead of the unit. 100 meant he had to run 100 meters, well, more like 100 paces. Measuring meters in this dust and sand was impossible. And he had to go alone. In theory, it wasn't so bad. Sure, there was the risk of landmines, but over the entire tour, only 2 guys had been injured by them, so the frequency wasn't that high. Theoretically, the locals were a danger too, but that wasn't much of a threat either. Theoretically, there was a ban on shooting, but locals still ended up dead regularly. The Europeans weren't just equipped with old American rifles, they also carried a variety of dangerous tools and had significant physical advantages over the locals. They were bigger, stronger, and cruder, with better physical conditioning and universal education that had taught them that the best defense is a preemptive attack. On the other hand, a primitive person has a significant advantage in an attack over an educated one, and mercenaries were often recruited from the well-educated, especially the younger ones. And precisely this time one of those younger mercenaries found himself surrounded by 3 locals, right at the moment during his penalty run when he couldn't see anything anymore. A sweat poured down in streams from under his metal helmet, blinding him. That fleeting moment. What would tip the scales? He had an American rifle, they had nothing. Unfortunately, there were 3 of them, and they had him surrounded. Everyone had heard stories about mercenaries who were killed, and what was done to them afterward. On the other hand, there was an absolute ban on shooting, and how could he shoot at people who were merely encircling him, grinning widely? That they intended to kill him was beyond doubt. What would prevail? European technology and training, or their wild lust for the treasures they believed he carried? An M1 rifle or short Dewey knives? There wasn't even room to use the rifle. A large, square-built, and grotesquely sweaty European versus 3 small locals who, still smiling, were drawing their knives. Training won out. Hofman smiled too. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, which visibly confused them, and then he reached out and touched the nearest attacker. He touched his face. Exactly as the instructors had drilled, pure psychological trickery. The man reacted completely irrationally. In a move of sheer stupidity, he grabbed Hofman's hand with both of his. That's when Hofman drew his old English revolver and fired between the man's legs. Not even at his balls, just at the gap of air between his legs. It was enough. The officer running and shouting, "Police! Hands up!" was no longer that young mercenary. But he remembered well. 2 commandos from a special forces unit blocked his path, both armed and confident their target didn't stand a chance. Hofman reached out and touched one of them. He touched his face. And, just like in Chad, completely irrational, stupid, and senseless, the commando grabbed Hofman's hand with both of his, dropping his weapon. "Okie dokie," a springlet used to say. Hofman fired a shot between the man's legs. The commando reacted just as the black man in Chad had, screaming in fear. He fell backward, clutching his unharmed crotch. The second commando, stunned, took a shot directly to his Kevlar bulletproof vest. With shattered ribs, he flew backward, smashing through the glass doors of the morgue. This wasn't like in the movies. He didn't get up, dust himself off, and open his jacket to show bullets neatly embedded in his vest. Instead, he lay there, screaming and vomiting at the same time. This wasn't a Hollywood action blockbuster. This was reality. One was retching, while the other, shocked and unarmed, felt around his groin. Then he got up and slammed his head into the windowsill of the security booth with such force that he chipped off a piece of the marble. The blow knocked him down again. The second commando, finished vomiting, fired 2 shots. Hofman fired 2 in return. It really wasn't like in the movies. Reality was different. Despite being only a few paces apart, neither hit their target. Fear, adrenaline scorching through their brains, trembling hands, panic, and shock rendered their aim useless. The commando fired again. Hofman did too. Missed. The commando stumbled backward through the shattered glass doors, fired another shot, missed, and vomited again. Hofman sent 5 bullets his way. Only one hit, striking his vest on the shoulder. The impact spun him around and sent him to the floor, disarming him in the process. The first commando, the one who had broken the marble windowsill, had a blooded face but was trying to get up. Hofman cuffed his hand to a radiator. Meanwhile, the second commando zigzagged toward a van with its doors open. He crawled inside, and the driver hit the gas, speeding away. "Rock and roll," said Chatterbox, laughing, clearly pleased. "Since I died, I've really come to enjoy these games." Big Boss stirred the awful coffee brewed by his new assistant, eyeing his officers like he was seeing them for the first time in his life. "Gentlemen, can I trust my own eyes?" No one answered. Big Boss flipped through some files with his left hand. "Can I really believe that 2 commandos tried to shoot one of my officers?" Someone gulped audibly. A desperate soul dared to speak. "The files don't indicate they were commandos." "Oh?" Big Boss made his famous expression along the lines of, "Impossible. You're telling me the atomic bomb was not invented by ants?" "Really? Unbelievable." He took a sip of coffee and grimaced. "I have here a photo of a patch from the Kevlar bulletproof vest taken off the captured attacker. Gentlemen, am I mistaken, or is that a vest issued by the Polish police?" No one answered, so Big Boss continued. "A limited series, not available in commercial stores. Could it be the AT Brigade again?" Still no response. The AT team had been in deep shit in Wrocław ever since the infamous incident at the Reduta Club. Acting on informal orders, the commandos had gone to rough up the club's patrons, off-duty, in balaclavas, but otherwise in civilian clothing. But their disgrace didn't stem from their involvement in the shady, still unexplained dealings surrounding the event. No, they earned it because they were beaten by the club's security and regular guests. The brave commandos, fit for arresting 6-year-old girls or occasionally shooting each other by accident in the barracks. The new secretary broke the gloomy silence in the chief's office. Unsure how to act, she slid a document under Big Boss's nose. He read a few lines, then looked up. Those who knew him began to truly worry. "Gentlemen," Big Boss said, "am I working at the regional police headquarters or a cat house?" The silence was almost tangible. No one dared lift their gaze. Could anyone answer this simple question? Silence. The assailant arrested by Hofman hanged himself in his cell. "Am I working in a brothel? Do I look like a pimp to you?" The officers almost started nudging each other, desperate to shove someone forward to respond. "Am I working in a brothel?" the large man behind the desk repeated. "No, sir," someone finally mustered the courage to say. "You're working at the regional police headquarters." Big Boss pushed the now-cold coffee away. "Then within a few days, I want a full explanation. Alternatively, your resignations. Bring me one or the other, gentlemen," he joked grimly. Matisik staked out the military hospital, while Temeki stationed himself by the railway one. The two old men didn't raise any suspicion. Such types always linger around the ER. They complain, grumble, pester the staff, and ask about medicines for the myriad ailments tormenting them. A nuisance, but one that's ignored, unseen, as transparent as air. Temeki got lucky. The angels had been clear, either here or there. The angels were always right. But this time, it was Temeki who hit the jackpot. A man wrapped in elastic bandages barely limped onto the driveway. On his back, near the right shoulder blade, he sported an additional dressing. Fucking spec ops. They could have taken him to Potnan or Lublin for treatment. But no, they always stuck to their routine. The bandaged man glanced at the old man slowly finishing his favorite egg and horseradish sandwich, the pungent odor of digested garlic wafting around him. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The steely gaze of a perfectly trained commando locked with the watery eyes of an old man. The commando should have felt fear, but he didn't. He didn't know those blurred eyes belonged to Dariusz Temeki, nor did he know that hidden in the sandwich bag was a tiny revolver loaded with .22 short rounds. A crappy weapon, too weak to do much against an attacker. But against a victim, it'll do. Especially when the finger on the trigger belonged to Mr. Temeki. The injured commando struggled to climb into a car waiting for him in the parking lot, ignoring the old man nearby. He shouldn't have. The first .22 short round hit his spine, the second, a kill shot, struck the back of his skull. There was no loud bang, no alarmed cries for the police, no panic in the parking lot. The .22 short, a professional's weapon. And a revolver, no less, leaving no casings scattered around. Temeki leaned in to make sure the man was truly dealt with. The driver, wide-eyed and shocked, stared at him in disbelief. "What are you staring at?" Temeki said, taking another bite of his favorite sandwich. The reek of garlic and horseradish intensified. The panicked driver stammered, his brain working at full throttle. "Enjoy your meal." "Thank you," Temeki replied, turning slowly. "Kindest regards from Mr. Hofman." "Have a pleasant evening." Unbothered, he hobbled off into the night, his rheumatic hip aching with every step. Police went crazy in the city. The murdered assistant to the big boss himself, the assault on Hofman. There wasn't even a single informant who wasn't dragged out of their hideout and brutally pressed for info. Tons of paper rolled through fax machines, internet passed millions of emails, phones ringed incessantly. The inner city, hidden somewhere beneath the surface of the regular life, was boiling. Everyone, both criminals and officers, perfectly knew that a head is needed. A head of a culprit. And that there will be no mercy, same as in the memorable case of the deviant who a dozen or so years before had been violating and killing minors. As he had slightly too much on his conscience and the law enforcement had been shamed by letting them run around for a bit too long. A police spokesman had confessed to the journalist on one unofficial occasion, "We're not letting go. And when we get him, there will be no trial. This man is already dead." And no one of the journalists had believed him. They had caught the man a few months later. And, indeed, there had been no trial. The man had hung himself in his cell, and no, none other criminal had access to him. He had just hung himself, no reason, just like that. Everyone knew this time would be the same. The son of a bitch who's behind all this will hang himself, no reason. Police raved. Every thug, scum, bandit, thief, or even mafiosos went even further underground. Everyone saw that this was a time where provoking the law even slightly would face a fierce pushback. Hofman tore through the police seals and opened the door to Springlit's apartment with a key he still had from the earlier days of their closer relationship. After spending the entire day filling out paperwork about the incident at the morgue, he wasn't exactly in his best shape. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a crushing exhaustion made worse by a cold. His eyes were barely open, and he kept wiping sweat from his forehead, hair, and neck. He didn't plan to stay long. Nausea churned in his stomach. Anger and grief, a potent mix, made it hard to breathe. He just needed to find something the investigative team had missed during their search and inspection. God, it was so simple. He opened a secret compartment in the desk, a hiding spot he had made for Springlet himself. Knowing the methods and procedures of forensic teams, he had designed it to elude even the professionals. He smiled to himself. Inside was only a small notebook. But that was exactly what he had come for. Hofman sat down at Springlet's desk. A new wave of nausea swept over him. "You bastard, whoever did this," he thought, "you're already dead, you piece of shit." He opened the notebook to the correct page. He knew exactly which one and also how to decode the encrypted numbers inside. He dialed one of them using Springlet's phone. As this was a device that belonged to the deceased, it was unlikely to be tapped. Unlike his own cell. "Krutnica, speaking?" "Hold the tape with your finger," he said. "What? Do you even know what number you just called? You know who's about to kick your ass? Hold the tape." Lasses did. A very long silence, then the faint sound of a tape being stopped, the noise of manual rewinding, and hesitation in her voice. "What's my nick?" "Gal. Are you Lass X?" "Yes." She asked a few detailed questions, then demanded the whole story. By the end, Hofman was absolutely sure the recorder's tape on Warsaw side was being firmly held and wasn't budging an inch. "What do you need?" she asked. "Help. Anything you can." "Okie dokie. I'll move heaven and earth to get you something." He knew their jargon. "Stay in touch." "Okie dokie. Please. Just drop him dead." "All right?" "All right." He hung up and dialed a number in Bydgoszcz. "Senior Sergeant Wasilewska, speaking." "Hold the tape with your finger." "What? Do you even know what number you just— Oh, hell. The special unit's already on its way to you." Lasses did. "Cancel the alarm and hold the tape." Silence. Barely audible sounds of a tape being stopped and manually rewound to erase the first recorded words. "Well? What's my nick?" "Assy. Goddamn. She asked a few questions that could prove his identity. Then he heard something like a sigh, another sigh, and the sound of someone wiping their nose. "I know why you're calling. I'll pull out all the stops and get you everything I can find. But I have one request: shoot him." "Okie dokie," he replied. "Seriously, man. Shoot him, please. She was a close friend of mine, and that bastard who killed her doesn't deserve to walk this earth." "Are you holding the tape?" "Yes." "For real?" "For real." "Then, consider it done. I'll shoot the asshole." "Okay. Now you'll see what it means to pull out all the stops. By tomorrow, you'll have everything I can dig up. Stay in touch. Over and out." Chatterbox, standing on the windowsill, smiled sweetly. Both of them did hold the tapes. Cool beans. Matisik and Temetsky should have starred in a movie. Some amateur 8mm reel of their exploits among palm trees hadn't done them justice. One emerged from behind a parked semi-truck near the gas station, while the other approached from the front. They would have had him, if not for Chatterbox, who was dancing on the hood of Hofman's car to the lively rhythm of a radio tune. Despite their age, both men moved with surprising agility and precision, a geriatric mafia. Hofman stood with his FB Glauberite concealed under his jacket in a spot where the station cameras couldn't catch him, right under the awning of the small shop, taking cover behind a pillar. Matisik and Temetsky didn't seem particularly surprised. Clearly, they hadn't intended to ambush him. This was just their learned way of taking care of things. And how effective that way was, Hofman had known ever since he was almost 5 years old. "Where'd you get your guardian angel?" Matisik was the first to approach. "What?" "First," Temetsky cut in, "put away that submachine shit before someone sees it." "Shit? Well, compared to your RAK. They exchanged a glance. Too quickly, too nervously, Hofman engaged the safety on his weapon and stowed it in his bag. He could believe now they weren't planning to attack him, they were too stressed for a quick hit with a clear target. They obviously wanted to talk. Interesting, what do they have to say? Where do you get your guardian angel? Matisik repeated. His poorly fitted dentures made him hard to understand. Who? How did you know we'd be here? How do you know about our RAK? Hofman glanced at Chatterbox, still dancing to the upbeat song. Why does that matter to you? He chose not to answer the second question. He simply remembered events from 30 years ago. And he preferred that they never piece it all together. Let's not waste time tossing words back and forth. We won't get anywhere like that. Hofman had a vague idea of what they wanted. It's Chatterbox, he said. Damn it, muttered Matisik, the man who had shot 2 students in Pyacheska. Hofman could see it vividly, the close-range shooting of 2 young, completely defenseless girls. Almost 5 years old. He shot 2 girls, some pipe sticking out of his mouth. He shook off the haunting memories of his childhood. Holy fuck of an asshole, muttered Temetsky. Another prime specimen, the guy who had shot a little boy and his mother. He also had a pipe sticking out of his mouth in those memories. Lovely, right? Is there any way to erase memories? Hofman shook his head. Him, a cop, talking to these guys? He should arrest them. He had to arrest them. Protect society from scum like this. Arrest or shoot them. He was exactly meant to do that, to protect that woman who had just walked into the gas station shop, rummaging in her purse for her credit card. And yet here, he had to talk to them. Chatterbox shouldn't remember anything from the effect, Temetsky said. She doesn't, Matisik replied. She knows something. She senses something. But how does this officer know about the RAK? Who knows? All right. Let's discuss. Matisik headed to a small, lantern-lit garden next to the gas station. He ordered tea for himself, Hofman got a beer, and Temetsky didn't order anything. Instead, he pulled a sandwich with eggs, horseradish, and garlic out of a paper bag. They sat there on a warm summer evening, sizing each other up in silence. We took care of the other one, Temetsky said suddenly, spraying crumbs across the table. The other who? The other guy who attacked you. Hofman nearly dropped his frosted glass in shock. He shook his head, thinking hard for a moment while fumbling for a tissue. He was still nursing a cold, and his nose wouldn't stop running. You've just confessed a murder to a police officer, he said, lighting a cigarette. You're under arrest. He rested a hand on the glauberate hidden in his bag. You're under arrest for the murders in Pyacheska. You'll also be charged with blowing up the Agricultural Academy building in Wrocław, the Bank Rotunda in Warsaw, a residential building in Gdansk, and… Hold on, Matisik interrupted. It's not so easy to pose a threat to us. Neither to you, as things are right now. Wait, and how do you think I could have caused all these explosions? Temetsky added. With tons of Semtex? A 14 wrench and a candle or a cigarette butt. Stop it, Matisik cut in. We're all in the same shit now. Hofman sat with his hand on the grip of the machine pistol hidden in his bag. He did not get anything at all. See, Matisik continued, sipping his tea. Dek, when he shot that guy, told the driver it was on your orders. Why? So they'd know to be afraid of you, not to send 2 idiots barely trained on some field exercise. Hofman kept his hand on the gun, raising his beer glass to his mouth with the other. Thanks for warning the enemy, he muttered. And what did we warn them about? Matisik snapped. You already knew they wanted to kill you, didn't you? It's about making sure they know, Temetsky interjected. Know what? That you've got someone like Chatterbox, the 67-year-old hitman replied with a slight smile. No one bothered repairing the bullet-riddled airplane, but burning the damned pile of aluminum wasn't an option either. They didn't have enough explosives to blow it up, so Temetsky sent a translator to the nearest village. The message was clear: those damned white folks would leave the plane on the grassy strip nearby. It wouldn't be guarded, but anyone caught trying to steal a single part would be executed on the spot. For the next 7 days, even approaching the plane was absolutely prohibited. The translator ran back to the crash site. Temetsky was now certain that within a week, the villagers would strip and loot the unattended aircraft down to the last bolt. It was a treasure trove of good metal and useful items for the villagers, at least one problem off the list. "Strip down!" Matisik shouted at the commandos. "Strip down immediately!" Helmets, belts, uniforms, and gear were discarded under the palm trees. They didn't even have time to gather the uniforms and burn them. After what had happened, chaos ruled. The men were practically sprinting to change into civilian clothes. Their weapons were stashed in special compartments under the frame of a civilian bus, but this was no organized operation. This was pure horror. Desperation, disarray, and abject fear. Matisik tried to issue orders, but they barely made a difference. The fact that several dozen tourists in colorful clothes eventually boarded the massive vehicle was thanks only to their overwhelming terror. A brightly painted bus rumbled down a dirt road shaded by dozens of palm trees. Inside, it carried a mysterious crate, several hundred kilograms of weapons and ammunition, and the tourists themselves, including 3 dead and 2 wounded. What's to be surprised about? Just another ordinary guided tour from Poland. And in Argentina, as long as you paid everyone along the way, no one asked too many questions. In Argentina, as long as you paid everyone along the way, no one asked too many questions. Recounted Matisik. T was visibly not up to his liking. But as we were transporting what we were, he hesitated. We almost shat our pants. "What were you transporting?" Hofman asked. "Oh, for fuck's sake," Temetsky snapped. "You think they told us?" "Or what?" "Don't bother with his language," Matisik interjected. "He was a sergeant." "But you must have some idea, right?" "We know something. Something weird." "Which is?" "First," Matisik began, Argentina, a country that, after the war, became home to the largest number of refugees from Nazi Germany. Second, a heavily guarded estate in the middle of nowhere. 2 airstrips nearby, a massive wall surrounding it, guard towers, machine gun posts, flamethrowers. Third, besides our translator fluent in the local language, we had 3 people who spoke perfect German. "We landed like some clumsy cows," Temetsky added. "Straight under their noses. And we fucked it up, big time. Soldiers unloading from the plane, piles of gear and equipment. One after another. Fuck, it dragged on and on. Just one idiot after another, loaded with baggage like pack mules. Really, more of a clusterfuck than a military operation. And to think it was supposed to be a lightning strike," Matisik said, pushing aside his half-finished tea. "But fortunately, there was a backup plan, a psychological attack. So that's when I said, guys, time for plan B." The soldiers, loaded down like pack mules, trudged one after another toward the nearby estate. They didn't look particularly combat-ready, shuffling slowly with no free hand even to wipe the sweat from their brows. They barely managed to reach their designated starting positions, previously marked by reconnaissance. They had almost certainly been spotted from the guard towers, but their sluggishness might not have triggered an immediate panic. That's why Matisik said, "Soldiers, time for plan B." The soldiers began setting up mortars. The positions had been perfectly calculated by reconnaissance and marked with fluorescent stakes. As they adjusted the sights according to pre-printed tables, one of the translators grabbed a megaphone and started speaking in German. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed residents. We are the Polish army. Regrettably, we are compelled to conduct an assault against your estate. We apologize in advance for any inconvenience this may cause. We also extend our condolences for any losses that may occur. A crowd of soldiers, or perhaps guards, armed with rifles, spilled into the courtyard. Chaos erupted as people bumped into each other, the throng growing thicker. The translator didn't take his mouth off the megaphone. The attack will commence in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. 5 mortar rounds streaked toward the courtyard. Reconnaissance's flawless calculations left no need for adjustments. All 5 exploded in the densest cluster of defenders. We'll now repeat the volley, the translator said warmly. 1, 2, 3. Oops, pardon. Our soldiers fired sooner than expected. My sincerest apologies for this discrepancy. Terribly sorry again. These artillerymen fire with no rhyme or reason, much too quickly for proper announcements. Shall we send our medic to that Mr. crawling around with his insides hanging out? 3 more rapid salvos followed, then the assault began. Smoke grenades and mines planted under the grass by reconnaissance were triggered, creating confusion. The team reached the estate without casualties, just as the streams of fire died down. The trouble began afterwards. "Hi, Gal speaking," came the voice on the phone. "Hello there, Assie here." Senior Sergeant's pearl-painted fingernail immediately pressed down on the tape of the police recorder. The reel stopped spinning. Apparently regional police commands in Bydgoszcz and Warsaw were discussing something that should not be recorded. "Did you find anything about Lass?" "Absolutely nothing." "Same here." "What do you think that means?" "I'm not sure." "What about this? Lass called us, and we both almost immediately found her something. Now we're bending over backwards, and there's nothing. Zero, null." "You're right. That's crazy-ass weird." "It's not just weird, it's deliberate." "I get it. They set us up, feeding us some old trash." "Exactly. We found only what we were meant to find. Don't you find it suspicious that in Bydgoszcz, I suddenly found an old film supposedly because someone wanted to recover silver from the tape, and that film just happened to turn up exactly when Lass needed data?" "You're absolutely right. They planted it on us." "But why?" "To set Hofman against Matisik." "Oh fuck, that fits. I'm calling Abwehr." "You've got someone there?" "Of course. Stay in touch." "Okie dokie. Count on me if needed." The Argentinian estate was obliterated with dozens of kilograms of top-notch Czech Semtex. It wasn't even a coordinated military operation, it was simply a massacre. Whenever the commandos ran into any kind of problem, they simply packed in as much Semtex as they could manage and boom. They blew up everything that could be blown up, though they managed to secure the crate without any casualties. Too much explosive material, too much ammunition hauled off the plane. These days, RPG stands for role-playing games, but back then, it only meant Russian rocket launchers, supposedly anti-tank weapons, but in practice, they could blow apart any door, with devastating collateral damage. Devastating for the defenders, that is. The trouble started a bit later. A wounded sniper lay dying, screaming incomprehensibly, while 2 others were too terrified to poke their heads out from behind the remains of a wall. "He sees my position," yelled the one glued to a tree. "He sees my position." "Don't fuck with me," Temetsky shouted back. "He can't see it. He's predicting my moves." "Yeah, right. Just shoot, motherfucker." The sniper peeled himself off the tree, but before he could even look through the scope, he took a clean shot directly between the eyes. "Son of a bitch." Temetsky fumbled with his camera, then pointed at the next sniper. "Your turn. Shoot." "He sees my position." This sniper was unnervingly calm. It's like someone is standing right here, giving him the coordinates. "You've lost your mind." "One of ours? Or someone invisible?" The sniper glanced at his fallen comrade. "It's like someone standing right here." Temetsky was on the verge of exploding. "None of ours even has a transmitter. No one could be giving him our positions." The sniper bit his lip. Someone is standing right next to me, he said calmly. Well, then I guess they're invisible. Shoot, for fuck's sake. The soldier swallowed hard and leaned out from cover. Before he could bring the scope to his eye, a perfect headshot took him down. Oh, for foo, Temetsky stood frozen as if he had been paralyzed. Bring more Semtex, he barked after a while. How much? Someone yelled from the rear. Why not the whole damn ton? Not the most funny joke, but the senior sergeant wasn't in the best mood. This is Cabinet, came the voice of an incredibly irritated woman on the phone. Cabinet was the code name for the regional police headquarters, just a place full of cups, or rather, cops. Interagency conversations used different code names, and this time the pause before the reply was noticeably longer. The phone recorder was far more advanced, and holding down the tape with a finger wasn't enough. More steps were necessary. This is Abwa. Go ahead, we're off the record, came the response. Off the record meant without recording. Abwa was just a nickname for the ABW, the present acronym for the Internal Security Agency, with its creative expansion practically self-evident. Cabinet is requesting support. They killed a friend, a police officer. Most likely an internal setup. What? Likely an internal matter. I don't know. Maybe the military, maybe intelligence, maybe the police. In any case, one of ours killed one of ours. Killed her, for fuck's sake. Ms. Aneta Bilak, who'd answered the phone, thought she must have misheard. But the Big Boss Assistance Network never missed a beat. Okie dokie, Abwa will provide full support. All right, thanks. I'll send the details to your terminal. Not the terminal. Everything here is recorded. Okie dokie. Personal meeting. I'm in Warsaw. I know. And I'm in Wrocław. Fine. I'll be there in about 6 hours. Okie dokie. I'm turning off my mobile. Call me on the number of a phone booth. I'll send it to you now. Thanks for the help. That's what we're here for. That's why our fathers fucked our mothers, so we could help one another now, she repeated the tribal's motto of their tight-knit network of a few dozen women who could move mountains, even though officially they had no power. The girls could be sure that precisely such unofficial mountain movement will now take place. But one thing was absolutely certain, it would come with an incident report and full documentation. Matisik glanced at Temetsky. The garden bar by the gas station was now completely empty. Hofman felt his hands trembling. I have a strange problem with you too, he said, lighting a cigarette. He took a deep drag. Either you're feeding me complete bullshit, or you're telling the truth. And if it's the latter, then I have to accept the existence of supernatural forces. You talked to Chatterbox yourself. Is she a ghost? I don't know. I've got no fucking clue what is she, Temetsky said, reeking of garlic. Not a single motherfucker has a damn clue. To put it more civilly, Matisik interjected, we don't know anything more than what we've been told. And we haven't been told much. So what exactly do you know? Chatterbox is some sort of, how to put it, the former captain of the Polish army hesitated for a moment. We call them guardian angels. They're these strange entities, some kind of emanation or whatever. Definitely not human. Definitely not human? That much we know for sure. Angels barely have any memory. They don't recall many details about their real life. Essentially, they're, I don't know how to put it, condensed feelings. A cloud of emotions that once belonged to a living person, plus a bit of general knowledge about them. But they can do a lot. Chatterbox has already helped you, hasn't she? Angels always show up when you're in danger. She did help me, Hofman interrupted. Saved me from 2 hitmen. Exactly. That's what angels are for. That's why I said it's not so easy to pose a threat to us. It's damn hard, for example, to shoot us. Angels see what they want. They're not omniscient, but, for example, they can sense 2 assassins hiding around a corner. They can even tell if a clerk at the Warsaw Police Department is holding down the recorder tape with her finger. So sending hitmen after us won't work. The game is about pitting other agencies against us. I don't follow. What don't you follow? Matisik snapped. Can you imagine what moron would try to take me out by sending 3 commandos with AKs and some goddamn civilian? Can you? Admit it, the stupidity of this move goes beyond the wildest dream. Well, this much is true, Hofman admitted. Exactly. An angel isn't omniscient. They don't know everything, they're not God. So what can they do? They can immediately check, and simultaneously in several places, if someone's lurking with a sniper rifle. But they can't predict that an attack is coming from someone they don't recognize. They can warn you about shooters nearby, but they can't foresee that such an attack is being planned in the first place. They can't track down the person who ordered it. In summary, Hofman said, glancing at Chatterbox, still dancing on the hood of his car. An angel can see everything around them. They can be sent to Warsaw to check if someone's pressing their finger on a button, but they can't figure out who hired the killers to carry out the hit? Exactly. It's fucking hard to kill us, Temetsky added, but fuck you can set agencies or services against us, which confuses the angels. That's what happened with Felek. They sent an AT squad of sorts, planted fake evidence. Not sure. Angels are great on the battlefield, not so much in investigations. Okay. Hofman took a drag from his cigarette. Tell me one thing, gentlemen. He looked at them through a cloud of smoke. Who are angels? Matisik swallowed the last sip of his tea. Temetsky finished the last bite of his garlic-reeking sandwich. Abwa speaking. Super urgent. Annetta, theoretically just a secretary but practically a goddess as she had all the right connections, bit her lip. Get me in touch with someone from communist times who'd know about the cases from the SWW series. Why does this have to be someone from communist security? Her colleague from the archives yawned slightly. SWW series. A brief silence as the other woman checked something on her computer. Oh God. Just give me someone. You're digging into some weird stuff. No comments. Do you have anyone? A sigh on the other end. Take your pick. Internal affairs, intelligence, counterintelligence. Counterintelligence will do. A private number. The sound of fingers tapping on a keyboard was clearly audible through the receiver. I don't have anyone specifically tied to SWW cases. I'll give you someone who held significant positions during that time. Got it. I'll note it down. Don't. I'll hand it to you personally. More keyboard clicks over the intercom. Clearly, the archive girl was talking to someone. I need a counterintelligence contact. Request from Abwa. A pause. Now. It's for Abwa. A short moment after Annetta Belak was connected to an old, cultured man who had once had a lot to do with counterintelligence, Rocklaw, and who, quite simply, still had serious pull. The girls, when they wanted to, always knew how to find the right guy, part of their skills. Good afternoon. Annetta's voice was calm and focused. You don't know me. I'm with Abwa. Understood, she heard a cordial, elderly voice. Evidently, the older man was familiar with the latest code names. How could I be of help? Matisik's voice, though slurred due to his dentures, had a hypnotic quality. Slow, lazily flowing words. A cough typical of someone who smoked too much. And that gaze. Those damn eyes, occasionally lifted above the rim of a half-finished cup of tea. Damn nasty eyes. Despite his age, despite the utterly different times, despite the tyrannous of old age. They were the eyes of a snake. They could hypnotize, lull, terrify, and paralyze all at once. This was a man. This was an alpha male. This was someone you still had every reason to fear. If he was around, just run, and if running wasn't an option, at least commend your soul to God. And the second one was even worse. Temetsky seemed to have no eyes at all, just two dark slits. Yet in those slits, a fire smoldered. He wasn't the kind of guy to carry out shady orders. He was an atomic fire, temporarily housed in the body of a 67-year-old man. "You son of a bitch," Fire said suddenly. "You're onto something." "What do you know?" Snake Matisik smiled faintly. "I know his eyes. I know them," he rasped through a cough. "I've seen them before. I've definitely seen them. Don't screw with me, they're the same as mine. I know them." Matisik grimaced slightly. "Predator's eyes." Hofman raised his gaze. He supposedly had a woman's eyes, framed by long lashes. Once, as a child, he'd even cut his lashes with scissors because a shop assistant had said he looked like a girl. So what? What lurked under those lashes didn't bode well for the two men sitting across from him. And they were fully aware of that. "It went like this," Matisik said, wiping his lips with a paper napkin. "We brought over the crate. The flight across the ocean was pure, living horror. We hit every radar trap we could possibly hit. A Cuban plane with a Polish crew. It felt like someone was standing in the cockpit, dictating our coordinates. Fortunately, they didn't have the authority to send fighter jets after us," Temetsky interjected. "But we went through every form of harassment imaginable. Yeah. Luckily, our diplomats had been warned in advance and acted very efficiently." "What was in the crate?" Hofman asked. "We don't know. We didn't even dare to look." "You? You were afraid?" "Of two things. The invisible people around us and the official consequences of breaching confidentiality. The orders were clear." Annetta Belak from Abwehr couldn't contain her astonishment. A former secret police officer was explaining to her how the agency had learned about the CIA's operation in Argentina. The Americans had discovered the remains of a Polish airplane, specifically 38,000 parts repurposed by villagers into everyday items. These items were traded so fervently that a few even turned up near the country's capital. The operation had been shrouded in utmost secrecy. Among the findings were Polish helmets, uniforms, equipment parts, belts, canteens, bread bags, vests, thousands of Czech ammunition casings, jackets, military boots, and even a few towels labeled with Frotex Prudnik on their tags. They uncovered an abandoned bus with mortars and Soviet ammunition hidden under its frame. There was a burned-down mansion, so thoroughly incinerated that no bodies could be identified. Besides the clueless villagers, they even found a witness, an archaeologist who, terrified by the gunfire, had hidden in the bushes. He swore that the men who set the mansion ablaze had broadcast over a megaphone in German, "This is the Polish army. We apologize for any damages caused. Have a nice day." The security office was in a frenzy, desperately trying to figure out who was behind this provocation and how the Americans intended to use it. They uncovered nothing, while the United States classified the results of its investigation. However, they did learn that John Donovan, the CIA's lead agent in Argentina, had committed suicide. His successor, Mark Hofman, shot himself in his car. Jake Kelly, the next operative, jumped from the 17th floor. Then came Christian Bergerman, who drove a small car head-on into a speeding truck. The Americans found no concrete evidence, had the investigation classified, and didn't use it for propaganda purposes. Which reeked at a mile. It could all be summed up in two words: panic and confusion on both sides. Nobody knew anything. But the most unsettling question was this: if it had been a provocation, why hadn't the Americans exploited it? The pain in the ass was, we were supposed to deliver the crate to Rocklaw, Matisik said. We did. And then, basically, they cut us off from any information. For a while. He wiped his tear-streaked eyes again with a tissue. Then the not-quite-dead started showing up. What started showing up? Hofman nearly spilled the last of his beer. People who hadn't fully died. I don't know how else to say it. They were conducting some kind of experiments. They? Who do you mean? I don't know. Our commanders. Damn it, I was a soldier. I followed orders. Yeah, the guys at Nuremberg said the same thing, Hofman growled. And you were killing your own people. Aren't you clever? Matisik replied, his eyelid not even twitching. Annetta Belak from Abwa stared out the window in front of her, but she didn't even register the dark building of the precinct across the street. She was in a complete stupor, unable to believe what she was hearing. The ex-communist officer explained slowly. In the 1970s, they were tasked with monitoring agents of the West German Intelligence Service, BND. These agents appeared seemingly without any clear purpose. They didn't recruit spies, track military installations, photograph airfields, or attempt to infiltrate Poland's communications network. Counterintelligence was baffled by their inexplicable activities. All they seemed interested in was accessing bunkers. Wrocław, apart from the hundreds of hills visible to this day, now overgrown with grass, had 5 enormous, perfectly preserved bunkers. These were multi-story structures with small holes in their walls. Nobody knew what they were for. First of all, they were built in 1942, a year of Hitler's greatest successes. So why construct bunkers in a city situated in the heart of the Reich? A city that had never even been bombed until 1945? Why were these bunkers so massive? Why did they serve no defensive purpose? Once, they even brought in a sniper to check if it was possible to shoot through those tiny holes in the walls. He concluded that it wasn't, for various reasons. Moreover, the placement of the holes was entirely chaotic. And then, why were the plans of the Breslau defense drawn up in 1941 when these projects were conceived? Against whom? For what purpose? Why? Why was there anti-aircraft defense? In 1941? What bombers could have possibly reached Wrocław at that time? The first Allied planes managed it only 4 years later. Besides, the bunkers were too weak to actively counter an air assault. Monstrous, enormous structures, serving no apparent purpose. Useless, built without any sense, order, or functionality, as clearly reflected in all their documentation. But surely, one cannot call the Germans fools who built meaningless structures without purpose or strategy. There must have been a goal, given the immense costs they incurred. Unfortunately, no mention of the purpose behind these massive structures has been found in any archive. Later, no strategist, military expert, architect, or engineer could come up with even the faintest idea as to the purpose of these modern pyramids. Initially, it was speculated that they might have been constructed to house Soviet prisoners of war who were building a subway system. Indeed, there was a network of special tunnels connecting the bunkers. But again, the question arises, why? It could have been done cheaper, easier, faster, and at far less expense. Assuming the Germans weren't fools building mega-sized concrete sandboxes, the true purpose of their efforts remained concealed. The underground city existed. There were documented stories of subterranean roads wide enough for 2 large vehicles to pass each other. When constructing the bus station, a hole was dug in the ground, and truckload after truckload of concrete was poured into it, disappearing without end until a special plug had to be installed. And once again, the question arises, why? Examining the bunkers revealed nothing, all the downward passages were filled with concrete. So they began drilling. Unfortunately, due to the limited size of the rooms, the drilling reached only 20 meters below ground level. The architects called in for consultation were helpless. None of them could fathom why anyone would need a 20-meter-thick cap of unreinforced concrete. No one in their right mind pours such enormous amounts of concrete anywhere, especially without reinforcement. Sure, such caps are used in American skyscrapers. When the wind blows, the tower sways, sometimes by several meters, so it needs to be weighted from above. But first, not nearly that much concrete is required, and second, it must be reinforced. And here? Why? No one knew. What could have been done to find out? The architects offered a simple answer: dismantle the entire bunker and excavate the surrounding earth, then we'll know. Or possibly blow it up, though that was practically impossible, as it would mean taking out half of the city in the process. And what about the costs? The architects run away from the conversation at this point. Costs? Jesus! And beyond that, in several cases, a few nearby buildings would have to be demolished as well. To sum up, it couldn't be done. Sure, you could try chiseling tunnels, but really? What for? And who would pay for it? Since the issue wasn't a priority, just something strange and difficult to execute, the project was eventually abandoned. A very polite and cultured gentleman, who had once worked for the security office, continued his explanation. One thing puzzled him: BND agents went so far as to commit murder. They killed 3 locals, but no one was arrested, as the agency was more interested in answering one simple question: what were they looking for in those damned bunkers? What could possibly still be interesting there after several decades? Were they trying to retrieve steel or recover some kind of technology? After all that time? Ridiculous! Had they hidden gold, valuables, or documents there? And for a handful of gold, would government agents really kill people? Absurd! Perhaps they'd stashed the amber room there, since even such theories were circulating? But even assuming they could recover it and somehow transport it piece by piece to West Germany, then what? Would they place it in a museum in West Germany? Sell it to Brazil? Or perhaps display it in the corridors of their intelligence headquarters to admire it? Again, ridiculous! Nobody had the slightest idea what their objective was. Surveillance operations were carried out, but they led to no conclusions. BND gentlemen would arrive and then leave. Why? No one knew. The polite gentleman from the security office came across a certain document, though it was more a matter of personal curiosity. He asked himself, why did Wroclaw hold out until the end? Why was Wroclaw the last to surrender during the war? There was no strategic reason to fight for this city, even Berlin had already fallen. What's more, half the city was leveled to build a massive airfield in its center. According to legends and documents, only one tiny plane, Fiesler Storch, ever took off from it, carrying the fleeing Gauleiter Henk, who was later killed by the Czechs. But such a small piece of junk could have taken off from any wider street. Why then did Commandant Niehoff defend the city to the bitter end, to the very last soldier, the very last bullet? It's difficult to answer these questions. Fortunately, a first-hand account survives, recorded on a tiny scrap of paper. According to this account, not one plane took off from the airfield, but 2. The second was a massive military transport aircraft. It departed at night, from an unlit runway, carrying some kind of crate and a group of German scientists. The bunkers and tunnels were flooded with a sea of concrete. And then, Wroclaw surrendered. As the last Nazi city. They moved us off the project, Matisik said, suddenly breaking into a cough. He pulled out another cigarette, lit it, and inhaled deeply. But it quickly turned out that spec ops were desperately needed. They told us it was for the good of the nation, that no one in the world had ever created something this extraordinary. That we would gain power Poland had never possessed in its history. And after the experience of 1939, everyone wanted to do something to ensure we were safe. You don't remember those times? On TV, it was always war movies, in the press, war, 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 memories, wounds, the healing of scars. I remember, Hofman interrupted. Even as a kid, I wanted to puke from all the war talk. Well, then you know. The mentality of a besieged country, the awareness of defeat. And so many victims. Russian domination. And even the way other countries treated us as the worse ones. And they told us. What did they say? Hofman asked, still sitting on his plastic chair with an empty glass in one hand while the other rested on a concealed weapon. Worse still, Temetsky, sitting opposite him, also had his hand inside his bag. Maybe his submachine gun was older, less advanced, but Hofman knew that if it came to it, he might not come out on top. The man with slits for eyes was damn good, even at 67. He was simply a practiced killer. It's hard to put into words, Matisik muttered, biting his lip. They could do something. Something that meant a person didn't fully die after death. They could create an army of phantoms. Their conversation was interrupted by 6 young thugs who approached them, clearly drunk, wanting to rob them. "I like your wallet," the ringleader said to Hofman. "Mind if I keep it as a souvenir?" The group pulled short, lead pipes from their sleeves, a crude, blunt weapon, and one of the worst in close combat. Unfortunately for them, not against the men sitting at the plastic table. "Don't you like my submachine gun, kid?" Hofman asked, pulling a Glaubrit from his bag and aiming it at the would-be robbers. "I can give you a few bullets for free." "Maybe mine's better?" Temetsky added, pulling his RAK out of the bag. "I can give you a few rounds too. Cheap. Special offer." The thugs froze. One of them tried to back away, but Temetsky was faster. A swift kick to the ankle, and the man was down on the pavement, groping for the spot where his nose used to be. "We're in the middle of a serious discussion," Matisik said. "Please don't interrupt us." "We're genuinely busy." "Exactly," added Temetsky. "Take off your pants and get lost. Now." "Jesus!" Hofman watched the nervous fumbling as the would-be attackers unzipped their flies. "What do you need 6 pairs of pants for? Leave them be for now." Temetsky tucked his RAK back into his bag. "Maybe the station staff will need some rags to clean up whatever mess they've made." Matisik just nodded. He hadn't even touched his own gun, still holstered at his hip. He had his sergeant. Besides, he was too old for stunts like that. He had a much bigger problem to deal with. Aneta Belak from Abwa still couldn't pull herself together. After her meeting with her Warsaw counterpart at the corner of Witostwasza and Suska streets, she remained shaken. Las was killed, that was the central topic of their conversation. "And now we'll show them." Sure, we could show them. Even flash our asses. Yet now, the blood was in the water. The circle of women working in various agencies and precincts scattered across the country set their minds on killing the man who had murdered Las. This wasn't a trial, it was a sentence. The executioner had already been chosen, the only unknowns were the location of the execution and the identity of its victim. "Jesus, they're going to kill him." The Abwa officer panicked, puffing on a cigarette as she hurried toward the market square. "There will be no mercy, no forgiveness. They're just going to kill this man. Whoever he is. Wherever he is. He's already dead." Aneta walked into a bar and ordered 1 Mad Dog. She downed it immediately, tasting the syrup first, then the sting of Tabasco. Next, she ordered a kamikaze. Following the ritual, she was served 6 small glasses at once. "They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him." She drank the first shot of the blue liquid. "The guy is already dead." She lit another cigarette, picked up the next shot, and pulled her laptop from her bag. A few keystrokes, a brief wait, connecting some cables, linking it to her phone. And she had the data. Collected through an almost superhuman effort by dozens of women across the country who, this time, had given it their all. Truly everything. "Ah. You're already dead, buddy. A sentence is here. Now we just have to find you. Another kamikaze. You're already dead, man. Dozens of women in this country have conspired against you. And not just any women, powerful women. You'll see soon enough." Another shot. Let the alcohol burn through her veins. "You killed Las, you bastard. We won't forgive you for that." Aneta's fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard. And although it was against the law, she knew she would be a part of this undertaking. But the problem was that the effects started happening, Matisik said. "What effects, for crying out loud?" Hofman still kept his hand inside his bag. "Well, we really don't know what it is. They were conducting some experiments in Rocklaw. Killing people who didn't fully die. Just a little. They only died a little. Jesus, either I'm going crazy, or..." "So what would you say Chatterbox is?" Come on, what is it? Not a human. A living corpse. Invisible. Sentient. Able to transport itself thousands of kilometers to a designated location, instantly. Jesus! Am I dreaming? You're not, Temetsky growled. The problem was something else, Matisik continued. We believed that this technology, if it even is technology, would give Poland overwhelming power. We did it for the nation, for the good of our country. So that it would exist, so that 1939 would never happen again. Cut the patriotic crap. What are those effects? Well, yes. While it was possible to create the not quite dead, it turned out that the damn equipment caused tragic side effects. Strange grey spheres started appearing. And, anyone who touched that, like grey grass, for instance, was immediately infected. They died, but not entirely. Pure horror. These people would visit the living, they'd visit everyone connected to the project. I don't know what it was. Maybe some kind of radiation that affected both them and us? I don't know, I'm no scientist. But the zombies, as we call them, did terrible things. As terrible as what you did in Pyachiska? Hofman interrupted. Or maybe less terrible. Or more? He laughed, though he felt utterly miserable. He had to talk to these murderers. Where would you rank your actions on the scale of terribleness? Don't mock. The zombies killed people, Matisik said. Just like they killed that springlet of yours. Hofman choked on his own spit. Now they had him. Now they could shoot him. A moment of idiotic carelessness. But Temetsky only smiled. He took his hand out of the bag where his RAK was hidden. Matisik didn't make any moves either, he just smiled too. Jesus! Had it started, had both Hofman and Temetsky began shooting at each other, they'd have mowed down half the people at the gas station before killing each other. Jesus! How do you know about her? We know a lot, Matisik murmured. It's the rule, cover your ass before someone blows it off. Okay, Hofman said, instinctively using Springlet's favorite phrase. Why did you kill people? Damn it! Matisik's hand started trembling. Damn obvious, isn't it? They were infected. They'd show up as ghosts, or whatever you'd call them, and wreak havoc. But it turned out we screwed up right from the start. Anyone near the grey spheres was affected by them. Us too, unfortunately. Strings and stakes didn't help much, Temetsky interjected. OP-1 suits were useless as well, might as well shove all that gear up your ass. And disinfection? That didn't fucking work either. Something infected us, but in a different way. Different way? Yeah, damn it. The dead stuck to us, people who died in the operations. Let me put it another way, Matisik said. As long as the machinery was up and running, things kept getting worse. We killed, we burned bodies. The old officer fell silent abruptly. He looked directly into the eyes of the man sitting across from him. Marek, he said to Hofman. I truly did it for my country. I believed I had to. That I had to. And you know what I'll do for my country? Hofman growled. I'll kill you both. The Abwehr is an institution that doesn't struggle with information or data retrieval. Aneta Belak dialed the number displayed on her laptop. Good morning, she said sweetly. I'm calling from Abwehr. Oh, sorry, I mean, Internal Security Agency. Is this the Polish Exploration Society? Yes. How can I help you? I'd like to ask about the bunkers. The man's voice on the other end was quiet, calm and soothing. He didn't ask which bunker she was referring to. He already knew exactly what the woman from the ABW was talking about. He began explaining slowly, there's nothing to be found in the structures themselves. They now house warehouses, storage facilities, civil defense offices, in short, nothing of interest. However, conducting any serious research is nearly impossible because various state institutions get in the way. Drilling through the several dozen meters of concrete caps is out of the question. Some official always shows up immediately to forbid it, evict the researchers, and justify their obstinance with hundreds of pages of irrelevant documents. The bunkers aren't just a few isolated structures. They form a system. It's worth looking at the underground connection plans, which can still be dug up from the archives. And it's essential to review the so-called Vrobel list, a list of secret German facilities. To top it all, it needs thorough study, because the bunkers aren't just random buildings placed at random. They are part of a massive device. One enormous machine, hidden deep underground. Some kind of accelerator that stretches beneath the entirety of Rocklaw. Reportedly, BND agents fought each other to gain access to it. Today, no one allows any drilling into those gigantic concrete caps. There's always some prohibition, sometimes even from the health department. But there are no permits, and there likely never will be. No one grants access to Rocklaw's underground. Every facility manager whose grounds are drilled into and lead to an underground discovery suddenly starts making excuses and orders their people to cover up whatever they've unearthed immediately. It's not safe, they say. It's better not to approach the underground. And it's been that way for years. Anyway, there are a few witness accounts. It's one massive, monstrous device, and no one knows what it was used for. Or is used for. There's something there. Maybe some impossibly large accelerator. Who knows? It's a system, a multi-kilometer something. Just look at the wide tunnels nearby, are large enough for trucks to drive through and even pass each other. Unfortunately, getting inside isn't easy either. And finally, Annetta Belak said, "Could you tell me, unofficially?" "I'm not sure how to phrase this question." "Just say it straight," the man replied. "Well, it'll sound silly. You're not an officer, but..." "Go ahead and ask." Annetta hesitated. Do you think, in your opinion?" "Jesus, I don't even know how to put this. Do you think anyone ever turns it on?" The man's voice on the phone remained calm and soothing. They turned it on about 6 months ago." "Jesus! How do you know that?" "We always get a few ghost hunting enthusiasts visiting us. I even started making a chart, tracking how many idiots show up each month. The numbers usually hovered around a certain percentage. Then, 6 months ago, they spiked 5-fold. Why are you connecting the two things?" "I'm not connecting them. I'm not an officer. I just wish I could get into those bunkers, but I have no chance." "In a legal state?" "You have no chance?" "In a legal state. None." She was shocked. "And how do you know so much?" "From the same sources you're using." "That's impossible. You don't have the resources I do." "With some effort, I managed," he laughed. "And please remember, that device is on. Who knows what will happen?" Matisik was feeling increasingly sleepy. 72 years of life had taken a toll on his body, though when it came to his spirit, it seemed the ex-commando was still under factory warranty. He patiently continued providing Hofman with information. The experiment had succeeded in creating the not quite dead, but its effects extended up to 300 kilometers. Once, an effect was even observed in Czechoslovakia, which led to the most difficult operation they'd ever undertaken, one where they had barely avoided getting caught. They had to eliminate anyone who had come into contact with a grey sphere, as the consequences were horrifying. As for the zombies, they were extremely difficult to control. Those created on-site could be subdued and given orders, for instance, to kill Springlet. Unfortunately, entities that emerged from infections were consumed by uncontrollable rage, which meant they had to eliminate anyone who had been exposed to the greyness. This was far preferable to dealing with the ghosts, which didn't know what they wanted but were capable of a great deal. These weren't people, they were condensations of emotions. Very potent condensations. But later, something even more unsettling came to light. The OP-1 chemical protection suits they wore were ineffective. They themselves began to experience strange, abortive side effects. Partially dead people would attach themselves to them. These entities were referred to as angels because they were helpful to those they accompanied. Springlet didn't have an angel, which made her easy to kill. Hofman, however, must have partially infected himself at some point, which was why they hadn't been able to kill him. Chatterbox had intervened at just the right moment. And now, the most important part, when the ghastly side effects became apparent, the experiments were halted. When that happened, all the zombies seemed to have just suspended. Language truly falls short of describing these states. There are simply no words to convey what happened back then. Now, however, someone has resumed the experiments. For the past 6 months, the zombies have been active again. The mirage of power and control proved stronger than reason. But whoever restarted this didn't seem to understand what the end result would be. In another 6 months, the effects will begin to appear, grey spheres infecting people with death and madness. The consequences could extend as far as 300 kilometers from Wrocław. The effect could even appear in Germany or in the Czech Republic. The question of how the Germans had access to such technology decades ago remains unanswered. Perhaps they found a piece of a UFO? Was it a work of some genius? Who knows? Either way, it seems it's still not fully operational. Something always fails. There are always horrific side effects. Who's doing this? Hofman asked. I don't know, Matisik replied. I have no idea. At that moment, the phone rang. Mr. Marek, you don't know me, said a distinctly tipsy female voice. I'm Aneta Bilak from the Abwa. Yes? You know, dozens of women in this country, scattered across precincts all across Poland, have just proven that they can achieve the impossible. Excuse me? They've proven can do the impossible. Hofman finally caught on. You mean you know who murdered Springlet? Yes. I do. A moment of silence. Matisik and Temetsky were watching him intently. He bit his lip and then looked up. Both men flinched slightly, though they both appreciated this kind of intensity. Do you understand what this means? Do you know what will happen if you give me the details? He asked. I do, she replied, unfazed. That's exactly why I'm calling. Okie dokie, he muttered. I'm coming to you. Great. May I already say, alas, you will be avenged. There wasn't a shred of doubt in his voice. You may. And then he added, please inform the Wrocław HQ. Are you sure? For a moment, Aneta's voice wavered. I'm sure. They called a taxi since Hofman was after a beer and didn't want to drive. What instincts? Even with a potential shootout incoming, some rules shouldn't be broken, at least not traffic rules. Hofman intended to kill someone specific, not some random pedestrian. A difference. The police, who had been rampaging through the city, stopped in their tracks after a single phone call. They began preparing for the strike, one crushing blow. Like a hunter spotting their prey, calming down and starting to plan. Like a sniper holding their breath before taking the shot. The police were gearing up to deliver a devastating, almost impossible to counter blow. People gathered near the bunker on Kind Street. What a lovely name. Simply Kind Street. 3 men who emerged from the bunker were immediately tracked and identified, based on information obtained over the phone. Opposing them stood just one man. Large, hulking, and visibly angry. Police, he said. You're under arrest. And what can you do to me, you little punk? Asked the oldest of the men. Do you know who I am? Do you know who funds my operations and profits from them? I'm not a punk, Big Boss replied calmly. I'm the chief of the regional police headquarters in Wrocław. He showed his badge. There wasn't the slightest hint of nervousness in him. Oh, what an honor. Do you personally arrest pimps too? I'll read you your rights. Listen, kid. I'm a little higher up the chain than you. Give me one good reason why I should even talk to you. Big Boss smiled politely. You want a reason? He asked. Okay, he shouted louder, Marek. Hofman stepped out from a nearby gate, his Glauberite in his hand, its sights already aligned. "This is my argument," Big Boss shrugged. "And I've got a few more arguments hidden in the windows around us, but you only wanted to see one. Listen, mate." "I'm not listening. I'll read you your rights. The rest, you can explain to the prosecutor. You have no idea who you're messing with." The man made a fatal mistake, reaching into his jacket pocket, likely for his phone. Big Boss was quick to seize the opportunity. "He's got a weapon," he shouted. Hofman shot him, hitting him squarely in the forehead. The second man made a sudden move, and Hofman fired 3 shots, taking him down. The sights on his gun weren't perfectly aligned, that's what went wrong. The third man, the youngest, was the smartest. He darted back, disappearing behind the corner of the wall. And he might have gotten away. Police snipers in the windows hadn't accounted for everything and hadn't had enough time to fully prepare the operation, if not for the biggest mistake of his life. He underestimated the old man standing against the wall, reeking of garlic. And that was his downfall. Never underestimate Dariusz Temetsky, it never pays off. Temetsky barely glanced at the body lying on the ground before pulling a sandwich with eggs from a paper bag. Damn, he just loved that taste. Hofman approached Matisik, his Glauberite aimed directly at him. The Polish army officer just smiled faintly. "My turn now?" He didn't reach for his holster. Perhaps he even preferred it this way. In his snake-like eyes, there wasn't a trace of fear. "You killed people, you bastard. And I'm a cop. I'm here to protect them from you." Chatterbox giggled, sitting against the wall. Big Boss was calling his men. The commotion was growing. "I did kill," Matisik replied calmly, without the slightest tremor. 2 snakes glared at each other. "I did it for the good of the state, to ensure 1939 never happened again. I didn't kill for pleasure. Right or wrong, my country. The definition of chauvinism. I don't agree with you. Then shoot. I don't agree with that either. Fine. But believe me in this one thing, I killed out of conviction, not for pleasure." "I don't believe you," Hofman said, suddenly lowering the submachine gun aimed at the officer's head. "I know it." He turned and began walking down the street. The gesture so startled Matisik that he could only stammer, "How do you know?" "I was there." Hofman turned back briefly. "Back then, in Pietrzyska." "Christ. I knew I recognized your eyes. Is it really you?" 30 years earlier, in Pietrzyska, Felikjan Matisik pushed aside the branches with one hand. In the other, he held a RAK submachine gun, its sights perfectly aligned. His finger rested on the trigger. But he couldn't do it. His whole body was trembling. "Boy! Did you touch the grey grass?" The almost 5-year-old Marek Hofman opened his fear-filled, tightly shut eyes. "No, sir." Matisik was breathing heavily, visibly on the verge of vomiting. "Christ! My God! Then run, get out." "Yes, sir." "Run. And don't tell anyone anything." Marek bolted, tears streaming down his face in terror. He ran straight into a tree, impaling himself on a broken branch, which could easily have been mistaken for a gunshot wound. Then he screamed. They had pipes. They had pipes coming out of their mouths. He had incredible luck. The adult Marek Hofman walked down a street in Wrocław, wearing a bulletproof vest and holding a submachine gun. He caused panic among passers-by. He was in shock. All his childhood, his mother had kept telling him, there were no aliens in Pietrzyska. She would take the glass pane out his grandpa's photo and hold it up for him to smell. "Tell me, do you smell anything from the glass?" "No. I don't." "See? Just as glass has no smell, there were no aliens in Pietrzyska. No one killed anyone there. It's all in your head." Hofman, clad in his vest and gripping the gun, approached the nearest tram stop. people began to scatter. Wearing his combat gloves, he punched the protective panel of the stop. He picked up a shard of glass and sniffed it. It smelled. Now he could smell it. Now he knew. Now, he finally managed. He came to terms with all the nightmares of his childhood. Glass had a smell. Now he could smell it. Never mind, he was still in shock, he finally was at peace with himself. It was that strange, fleeting moment when everything seemed all right. When you forgive yourself, he sniffed the shard in his hand again. It smelled. Now he could smell it. Matisik had to run to catch up to him and was out of breath. But he managed to say, "They've activated the device. Even if they shut it off, effects will appear in the following 6 months anyway." He struggled to catch his breath. "Who's going to eliminate them?" Another struggled to gasp for air. You? You?